Tonight we enter a different kind of Harry Potter story. Not an alternate universe where the grave was empty, but a darker corridor inside the canon itself. 7 rooms, 7 scenes, 7 places where Harry stands alone with death, with love, with the unbearable truth of what this magic has cost. This is important, because HBO can rebuild Hogwarts stone by stone, can give us dragons that breathe real fire and a castle that finally feels its age, and still fail in the only way that matters. What if the series gets everything else right? The wands, the houses, the gleam of spellfire in the dark, and yet hollows out the moments where the story's soul was forged? What happens if the surface is magnificent and the rooms underneath are empty replicas? In the books, these scenes are not decoration. They are structural pillars, load-bearing spells holding up the entire plan of the saga. The Mirror of Erised is not just a clever charm in a forgotten classroom, it is Harry's first true meeting with the parents he never knew, and his first seduction by a beautiful lie. The graveyard in Little Hangleton is not just a set piece with a resurrected villain, it is blood on stone, bone in cauldron, and the night the boy who lived learns that prophecy does not protect you when the wand is pointed at your heart. On film, many of these encounters flicker by in minutes. The camera cuts away before the silence can settle, before temptation can breathe, before moral ambiguity can stain the air. Snape's worst memory becomes a brief humiliation, not a grave revelation of what James Potter really was and what Lily refused to become. The Department of Mysteries becomes a swirl of glass and colour, not a haunted hall where a thin black veil waits like a patient question mark. Television, bound by runtime and rhythm, will always feel the pull to trim, to explain, to hurry. But the books did not hurry. They lingered. They let Harry sit on the floor before the Mirror of Erised night after night, choosing illusion over sleep. They left him kneeling beside Cedric's body while Priori Incantatem sang out the ghosts of Voldemort's past crimes. They allowed Dumbledore at King's Cross to speak slowly, to confess, to let the white space between sentences say what even he could not. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated so much, could rush those pages. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins. Not Sirius, who had fallen through the veil, could be summoned back to fill the silence. Tonight, we will walk those 7 rooms one by one. The Mirror of Erised, Snape's worst memory, the Graveyard Resurrection, the Ministry and the Veil, Snape's pensive memories, Dumbledore at King's Cross, and the Battle of Hogwarts. Not as nostalgia, but as non-negotiable contracts HBO must sign in blood. Each scene is a locked door in the invisible house Harry's parents never lived to show him. Dangerous chambers lined with truths that cannot be faked without breaking the story itself. The series may change costumes, angles, even lines of dialogue, but if it darkens these rooms incorrectly, if it flinches from their full cost, then something essential will not survive the journey. So the question is simple and terrible. When the cameras return to Hogwarts, will those 7 doors still be there, waiting? Or will we open them and find only light and no grave at all? We will not open those doors at random. We will walk them in order, the way Harry did, the way the story built its own graveyard of moments and asked a child to stand inside. This is important. First, the Mirror of Erised, where he sees his parents fully alive for the first time and nearly lets an illusion replace a life. Then the graveyard in Little Hangleton, where a different grave and a different ritual use his blood to call death back into a body. the Ministry's veil, where death becomes a curtain instead of a corpse. Snape's worst memory, where the father Harry idolizes becomes a boy with a wand and a cruel streak. The Department of Mystery's battle and its aftermath, the Battle of Hogwarts. The King's Cross White Void, the final cascade of Pensieve memories. 7 scenes. One fragile soul being asked again and again, what is real, and what is a story adults told you so you could keep walking. Each of these moments is a staged encounter with ghosts. The parents in the mirror, the echoing shades from Voldemort's wand, the whispering voices behind the veil, the young James and Lily in Snape's memories. Harry keeps reaching, fingers outstretched, certain that this time the charm will hold and the touch will be solid. Again and again, he discovers replicas instead. Images, projections, partial truths bound by magic or memory or the limits of what the dead are allowed to say. Not Dumbledore, who had mastered the art of telling just enough truth to keep the plan intact. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins but never told him what it meant to stand in front of a killing curse. Not Sirius, who had tried, too late, to be something more than a story about the friend who would have died for James. Every adult becomes another kind of ghost, orbiting the same wound. In a prestige HBO series, these are not just set pieces. They are the spine. The budget will be there for the graveyard smoke, the Ministry's shattered glass, the spectral King's Cross. Longer seasons mean time for Wandlore, for the full Deathly Hallows myth, for the intricate choreography of the Battle of Hogwarts. But prestige also brings a quieter danger, the temptation to streamline, to modernize pacing, to trade slow internal corrosion for cleaner, louder spectacle. A single cut line, a shortened silence in front of a mirror can amputate a decade of grief. So our path through these 7 scenes will be ruthless and precise. For each, we will look first at the page, the exact words, the pacing of Harry's thoughts, the sensory details that make the magic feel heavy instead of pretty. Then we will imagine the best possible adaptation. The version where the camera becomes the Pensieve and lets us drown in what Harry knew and what he did not. And then, briefly, the worst, the bright, efficient replica that moves the plot and leaves the grave empty. This will not be a light catalogue of favourite moments. It will be a descent, a war map of grief and revelation, tracing how a boy's understanding of his parents, of death, and of adult lies is built one room at a time. At the end, if these scenes are mishandled, we will have to ask a final, quieter question. If Harry's encounters with the dead are softened, what is Harry Potter about at all? We begin where every orphan story secretly begins, with a mirror that offers a family and a boy who almost chooses the dream. The first time Harry sees his parents, they are already dead. They are standing in an abandoned classroom, in a mirror that should not be there, in a silence that feels like a grave. He has slipped out under the invisibility cloak, chasing the thrill of forbidden corridors and the faint hope of finding this mysterious Nicholas Flamel. What he finds instead is dust and cold and a mirror as tall as the room, framed like a tombstone. Waiting, he steps before it. Scrawny and alone in his borrowed pajamas, and the glass fills. Not with his reflection, but with a man with his face and a woman with his eyes, and a crowd of spectral relatives pressing in behind them, a family replica assembled out of longing and light. This is important. In the book, it does not happen once. It happens again. And again. Night after night, Harry returns, not to explore, not to learn, but to sit, to stare, to memorize the angle of his father's hand on his shoulder, the way his mother's eyes shine with a love he has never seen awake. The scene stretches over days until time itself begins to warp. Hogwarts, with all its magic and danger and living friends, recedes, and the boy who lived becomes the boy who sits. Rowling lets the horror seep in slowly. Harry stops sleeping properly. He stops eating properly. He lies to Ron. He calculates how soon after curfew he can slip away and how late he can stay before Filch might pass. He knows the figures in the glass are not really alive, but the knowledge does not save him. He would rather inhabit a beautiful lie than return to the cupboard of his own loneliness. What happens to a child who discovers that the dead are kinder than the living? Then Dumbledore appears, as if he has been there all along. Not Dumbledore who had merely stumbled on a boy in the dark, but Dumbledore who had placed a killing curse on his own curiosity years ago and learned to recognize obsession when it knelt before a mirror. He names it the Mirror of Erised, a charm that shows not the future, not even the past, but the deepest desire of the heart. He speaks of men wasting away before it, entranced until their bodies failed. He warns Harry. He promises the mirror will be moved, tells a half-truth about not seeking it again, and withholds the larger plan. Here, the thematic stakes are carved. Comfort is revealed as a trap. The dead are a drug. Harry's hunger for his parents is so absolute it begins to override survival, friendship, even wonder. The grave was empty, but the mirror offers him a different burial. A living entombment in nostalgia. If HBO compresses this into a brief, tasteful montage, the entire story tilts. Without those slow, repetitive visits, Harry's later refusal of the Hallows, his choice to walk into the forest, his understanding of what it means to meet the dead in King's Cross, all lose their haunted context. The boy who almost chose the mirror must exist on screen, or the man who chooses death cannot. Because the next time Harry stands between illusion and truth, it will not be in an empty classroom, and he will not be alone. So what happens if, when the series finally reaches that deserted classroom, HBO does the easiest possible thing? A single, beautifully framed shot. Harry steps before the mirror, the glass blooms with the figures of James and Lily, the score swells, a tear slips down his face, and we cut away as if a box has been ticked and the grave of his longing has been briefly acknowledged. The grave was empty. This is important, because in the book, Harry does not simply see his parents and move on, he returns, again and again, until the cold stone floor bites his skin and the night itself feels like a charm designed to keep him there. Obsession is not implied, it is documented. Each visit is another line in a quiet confession that nobody hears. Not Dumbledore, who had once stared into the same glass and seen his own dead, and who knew exactly how long a boy could stand in front of a lie. If the show compresses that into a single encounter, the story loses its slow tightening of the noose. Ron's reflection becomes a throwaway gag rather than a revelation. Harry sees a family. Ron sees himself alone, admired, elevated. Two boys. Two hungers, two futures. Without the repetition, without Ron's different image lingering in the viewer's mind, the mirror is sentimental decoration instead of dangerous magic. A pretty prop rather than a cursed altar to what might have been. In this alternate universe, where James and Lily are secretly alive and watching, a rushed mirror scene is more than a pacing error. It becomes a kind of fake resurrection, a replica of grief without duration, a polished illusion that copies the outline of the moment but not its weight. It is like parents faking their deaths but never staying long enough, even unseen, to watch their son grieve, to understand what their plan has cost him. The glass shows Harry what he wants most, but the audience must feel how many nights he is willing to trade for that vision, or the illusion has no teeth. The damage does not stay in first year. Without the mirror's lesson, the whispers behind the veil at the ministry risk feeling like a new curiosity instead of an old temptation with a different doorway. Priori incantatem in the graveyard, when the dead walk out of Voldemort's wand and circle Harry, becomes pleasant fan service instead of the most dangerous offer he has ever received. Stay. Listen. Linger with us in the green light. Even King's Cross, with its white mist and Dumbledore's confessions, depends on the viewer believing that Harry has been training since childhood to tell the difference between a comforting vision and the truth. If HBO softens this first encounter with the dead, if they treat the mirror as a beautiful interlude instead of a moral trial, will anyone fully believe that Harry is the kind of boy who might one day walk into a forest and choose death over a lie? So imagine HBO does the opposite. Imagine they treat the mirror not as a pretty prop, but as a season-long haunting, a quiet, glimmering wound that keeps reopening every time Harry slips under the cloak and goes wandering after hours. The first time, the camera should barely speak. No sweeping score, no sentimental montage, just the soft scuff of Harry's slippers on stone, the faint rustle of the invisibility cloak as it trails behind him like a small private grave. This is important. The discovery itself should feel like an accident, a wrong turn in a corridor that was not on any map, a door that should have been locked and was not. He steps in. The mirror looms. No inscription yet, no explanation, only the sense of very old magic watching him. The music does not swell, it retreats. We hear his breathing. We hear the tiny, human sounds of a boy who believes he is alone. And then, not at once, not as a jump scare, but with a deliberate, aching delay, faces begin to resolve behind his own. A hand at his shoulder, a woman's eyes that match his, a man who stands like him without knowing he is being copied. They do not move unless he does. They do not speak, no matter how he talks to them. Their smiles are still, eerie, almost like replicas carved from light. He presses his hand to the glass, theirs meet his. The grave was empty, but here is the illusion of what might have filled it. He whispers questions that have lived in him since before he had words. The mirror never answers. Across the next episodes, HBO could let this become a pattern. A plan. Harry slipping back under the cloak, drawn like a tide. Each visit shorter, more frantic, his eyes redder, his voice rougher as he begs the reflections to stay when Filch passes, when footsteps echo in the corridor, when he knows he should leave but cannot. The cloak and the mirror become twin motifs, concealment and revelation, lie and longing, wrapped around the same small boy who has never been allowed the truth. Then Dumbledore, not Dumbledore, who had always been framed as omniscient and unshakable, but a man who stands beside that glass and watches Harry with a sorrow that the child cannot yet read. HBO must linger here. On the way, Dumbledore's gaze flickers just once to some shape in the mirror that Harry never turns to see. A sister's shadow. A broken family gathered whole for a heartbeat. Lily was a charms prodigy, but Dumbledore was the one who weaponized love. The mirror should expose that both of them are guilty of wanting what they cannot have. The dialogue stays almost word for word, but the pauses grow larger. When he says, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live," we should feel that he is condemning himself as much as Harry. If HBO is careful, this posture, Harry facing the glass, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on what waits beyond a thin barrier, can echo through everything that follows. The veil in the Department of Mysteries, where Sirius falls and the curtain whispers. The gravestones in the little Hangleton graveyard, where another ritual of blood and bone tries to overwrite what death means. The forest in Deathly Hallows, where he walks without a cloak for the first time, no mirror, no charm, no replica parents to comfort him, only the certainty that he is going to die and the decision to go anyway. This is not fan service. This is the spine of his psychology. If HBO invests the time to let the mirror teach Harry the difference between reflection and reality, then every later encounter with death will feel like the continuation of one long, tragic conversation he began at 11, and only finishes when he meets Voldemort in the forest and chooses, finally, to step through the glass instead of staring at it. And once that choice lands, the next scenes on our list stop being isolated set pieces and start becoming consequences. Consequences need escalation. They need to cut deeper. The glass was only the beginning. In the Mirror of Erised, Harry met parents who could not disappoint him. A father who smiled without speaking. A mother whose eyes shone but never narrowed in disapproval. That mirror was a mercy and a lie. A surface of enchanted glass that offered an immaculate replica of James and Lily without the burden of their history. It showed longing, not life. It showed desire, not truth. This is important because when we reach Snape's worst memory, the story takes that first shimmering illusion and shatters it with something harder than glass. Unedited memory. The boy who once crept out under an invisibility cloak to sit in front of a dream now falls headfirst into a pensive and lands in a past that does not care what he wants to see. The grave was empty in the mirror scene. There was no cost to touching that fantasy. In the pensive, the grave is full of arrogance, of humiliation, of a father who laughs while another boy is dragged through the dirt. In Philosopher's Stone, Harry's pain is almost pure absence. No photographs, no voices, no stories that belong to him alone. His nights in front of the mirror are the ache of a child pressing his hands against a window, convinced that if he just stares hard enough, the glass might turn into skin and warmth. By order of the Phoenix, the ache has changed shape. Now, the problem is not what is missing, but what is suddenly unbearably present. The realization that the father he worshipped was capable of petty cruelty, that the Marauders legend has a shadow his teachers never named. The pensive is a darker mirror. Where the Mirror of Erised curves itself toward your desire, the pensive is indifferent. It does not flatter, it does not edit, it does not blink. Once Harry falls through that silver surface, there are no forgiving angles, no soft focus, no way to look away while James dangles Snape upside down and the crowd roars its approval. Not Dumbledore, who had curated truths and half-truths for Harry for years, can soften what that magic shows. Not Hagrid, who had called James and Lily the best people he ever knew. Not Sirius, who had laughed about school days with a nostalgia that carefully stepped around this afternoon by the lake. And here is where the adaptation will be tempted to flinch, to trim the jeering, to rush the silence after, to let James look a little less pleased with himself so that the grave of his reputation stays tidy. But if HBO protects James here, It protects Harry from the very adult complexity the fifth book finally unleashes. It protects Snape from being fully wounded, and therefore from being fully bound to the boy he cannot bear to resemble. Because what if they soften it? What if, in trying to preserve James as a hero, they erase the bruise that makes Harry's final understanding of Snape possible? The next scene on this list lives or dies on that bruise, and we are not at the worst of it yet. The bruise is not enough. The sting of a blocked curse, the snapped word on Snape's tongue, only prepares the ground for the day the myth of James Potter finally shatters. It happens in sunlight. This is important. Harry leans over the pensive in Dumbledore's office, pulled by the same hunger that once drew him to the Mirror of Erised, the desire to know, to see, to make the dead feel briefly alive. The silver surface swallows him, and he falls not into a grave or a battlefield, but onto the warm grass by the Hogwarts lake. Students are laughing. The sky is clear. The scene opens like a schoolyard comedy. It is a lie. He sees his father first. 17, handsome, bored, one spinning between his fingers like a toy. Sirius beside him, all sharp grin and easy arrogance. They are waiting for an exam to end, playing with their own power as if magic were a game. Then Snape appears, thin and alone, walking past like a man who already knew the world would not be kind. James attacks for sport. No duel, no provocation. A disarming charm, a trip, a blast that sends Snape sprawling while the crowd gathers delighted. Robes over his head, underwear exposed, a boy twisting in the air as laughter rolls across the water. The weather does not change. The light does not dim. That is the horror. The cruelty is casual, almost bored, and the imbalance is absolute. Lily arrives like a line of defense drawn too late. She cuts through the noise, fury in every step, demanding James stop. For a moment, the story seems ready to right itself. The righteous girl, the chastened boy, the bully unmasked. But James only preens, offers to let Snape go if Lily will go out with him, wearing his arrogance like armor. And Snape, bleeding pride and humiliation, reaches for the ugliest word he has. Mudblood, one slur, thrown like a curse, and the fracture opens. It runs in two directions at once. Away from James, whom Lily will not excuse, away from Snape, whom Lily cannot follow. That single afternoon becomes a fault line that will travel forward into Godric's Hollow, into a baby's protection, into the boy who will grow up believing his father died a flawless hero. The grave was empty of that perfection. It always was. Because when Harry is yanked from the memory, when Snape's rage crashes over him, something irreversible has happened. He has seen James as both savior and bully, rescuer and tormentor, and the viewer must hold those truths together without mercy. Not Dumbledore, who had curated James's legend, not Hagrid, who had repeated it with reverence, not Sirius, who had bathed in its glow, ever showed Harry this. HBO cannot drape this scene in nostalgia. No soft focus, no playful music. The lake must feel like a crime scene in daylight, because Snape's lifelong bitterness, Lily's impossible choices, and Harry's final understanding of the man who protected him all hang on this humiliation. If they try to soften James here, they will break the chain that leads to the next pensieve, the next revelation, where the cost of that afternoon finally comes due. But there is a subtler danger than soft focus and sympathetic framing. It is the temptation to forgive too quickly, to turn Snape's worst memory into something the camera itself excuses. Imagine the sequence bathed in nostalgic light, scored like a schoolyard prank. James levitating Snape above the grass while the lens lingers on Sirius's grin, on Remus's reluctant amusement, on the crowd as a sea of harmless mischief. The humiliation cut through with quips, reaction shots, a rhythm that tells the viewer this is uncomfortable, yes, but fundamentally safe. This is important, because if the scene reassures you as it unfolds, you are being coached not to feel the violation the books insist upon. In the text, the moment is a public stripping down at one point, a boy pinned and helpless while his enemies play with his body and his name. It is a grave in daylight, the burial of dignity. If HBO blurs that into the same tonal register as Weasley fireworks or a Quidditch victory, Snape's pain becomes an overreaction, his later bitterness a petty refusal to move on. His fixation on Lily begins to look like melodrama rather than the warped, desperate devotion of someone who once believed she was the only witness who saw him as fully alive. The entire arc that ends in the Pensieve, Lily's letter, the Patronus, the revelation that he has been Harry's shield for years, depends on the memory still stinging when we arrive there. Not Dumbledore, who had asked more than anyone, could make sense of Snape if that sting is gone. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from the ruins, could explain why this man's grief is so feral. Not Sirius, who had laughed on that lakeshore, could ever be truly reckoned with if his cruelty is filmed as boyish charm. Then there is the danger of explanation. The easy cut to Dumbledore or Lupin solemnly contextualizing James. He was young. It was the war. He grew out of it. A gentle monologue that arrives too soon functions like a charm against discomfort. A narrative spell that keeps the audience from sitting with the unvarnished, ugly truth that heroes can be abusers before they are redeemed. The grave was empty. The boy in the air was still screaming. Within this AU where James has literally faked his death, that softening is another kind of replica. Another fake death. The memory's sting is killed so that no one has to mourn the hero they thought they had, so that the long hard work of forgiveness becomes a foregone conclusion rather than a question. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even she could not design magic that cleans a conscience without cost. And so the section must end on a wound, not a bandage. If we are not allowed to see our heroes at their worst, what exactly are we being asked to forgive when we finally watch Snape's last memories fall like ash into the Pensieve? So the memory cannot be staged like a schoolyard prank. It must be filmed like an assault, like a haunting that Harry and the audience are forced to watch from inside the victim's skin. The camera should flinch last. This is important. When James's disarming charm hits, the frame must be tight on Snape's wand hand. The sudden emptiness of his fingers, the brief animal confusion in his eyes before he is hurled backward. Then closer, the angle dropping to his socks, pale and exposed as his trouser leg rides up, the fabric already dirty, already ridiculous. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the grave is Snape's dignity, stripped in front of a crowd that laughs. The lens should not look away when his body hits the ground. It should stay with his face as soil fills his mouth, as he spits and chokes, as the world tilts and the sky becomes a spinning blur behind jeering silhouettes. Not Dumbledore, who had once spoken of school days with a vague, forgiving nostalgia. Not Hagrid, who had told Harry his parents were the best he'd ever known. not Sirius, who had worn his own cruelty like a joke. None of them were here in this frame, only a boy being dismantled piece by piece. Sound must do what words on the page once did. The laughter should begin clear and then warp, growing too loud, too close, distorted, until it is almost one continuous roar. Each spell impact must sound wrong for a childish hex, the crack of magic like a bone breaking, the whoosh of wind as Snape is hoisted upside down too sharp for anything called fun. Over it, Snape's breathing, ragged and uneven, should rise until it is nearly a separate rhythm, the desperate gasp of someone who knew even then that this humiliation would never truly end. Only Lily cuts through. Her voice should arrive like a line of clean light in a filthy room, the sound design thinning around her as she steps forward. The camera must linger on her expression, the unflinching disgust at James's swagger, the refusal in her eyes when he tries to charm her with a grin. She is not a reward waiting to be won, she is a moral center, steady and furious. And when Snape, cornered and bleeding pride, spits that slur at her, the world should fall suddenly quiet. No music, no crowd. Just Lily's face closing, shutters slamming on a future that will never happen. Harry must witness all of it. Intercut his reaction like another layer of memory, his eyes flicking from James's laughing mouth to Snape's contorted features back again as understanding dawns in slow, horrified increments. The father he idolized is capable of this. The professor he hates was once this boy. In that realization lies the cost of any easy forgiveness. If HBO is wise, it will plant echoes here. The angle on Snape's hand reaching for Lily in the grass, mirrored later by his hand cradling her lifeless body in the ruined cottage. The sound of his choked breathing here returning, years later, as he sobs over the real Lily while her corporeal echo lies cold beneath an empty grave. Lily was a charms prodigy, and the magic that saved Harry will one day drag these memories to the surface like bones. When we fall into the Pensieve for the final time, when Snape's last memories spill out like ash, the audience should not need exposition to understand what he lost and why he clung to the loss. They will have seen the first wound already. The camera will have refused to look away. And once that visual language is established, the series can turn to the next scene. HBO cannot afford to soften. The graveyard where Voldemort rises again, and where Harry finally stands in the open with no parent between him and the dark. The graveyard is not an isolated horror. It is the destination of a line that begins in a school corridor, with a boy hanging upside down while his classmates laugh and his future murderer smiles. Harry watches his father torment Severus Snape, and something fundamental breaks. The hero he built from whispers and a photograph becomes a bully with a wand, a teenager drunk on power and attention. This is important. The story has taught him to revere James. The Pensieve forces him to see James as a boy who could be cruel, who could enjoy another boy's shame and call it victory. In that moment, the ground shifts. If James was capable of this, what else in the official narrative is untrue? Not Dumbledore, who had curated Harry's knowledge with surgical restraint, ever sat him down and said, "Your father was brilliant and arrogant, loving and unkind, capable of saving your life and ruining someone else's in the same breath." Not Sirius, who had mythologized the Marauders into a legend of clever rebels and neglected to mention the collateral damage that bled in their wake. Snape's memory is not simply character backstory, it is a charm that strips away illusion. It primes the reader to doubt the replicas of heroism that authority has placed before Harry since first year. The shining image of his parents in the Mirror of Erised, the polished speeches about sacrifice and light. We have just seen that adults lie by omission, that the truth is messier than the story Harry was given. Now the narrative is ready to ask a harsher question. What happens when flawed adults hold power over life and death, over prophecy and blood? That is the threshold that leads to the grave. In the Little Hangleton Cemetery, the escalation completes its arc. Harry moves from watching cruelty in a memory to becoming the object of a ritual that is not metaphorical at all. It is murder, prepared with care. The book slows down. There is no frantic cutting, no mercy in the pacing. Wormtail's knife, the bone of the father, the flesh of the servant, the blood of the enemy, each ingredient of the spell is given weight, as if the magic itself were a liturgy in honor of death. Here, Voldemort is not simply reborn. The graveyard scene bears the load of the series' secret architecture. The shared core of Harry's and Voldemort's wands, revealed through Priori Incantatem, plants the seed that will later flower into the Elder Wand's allegiance. The blood protection twist, Voldemort binding Lily's sacrifice into his own body, explains why Harry can one day walk into the forest and not fall. The grave was empty, but the bond remained. And for the first time, Harry is utterly alone. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins, not Dumbledore, who had appeared at the last moment so many times before. No teacher, no godfather, no parent between him and the dark, just a boy, a wand, and a circle of masked adults who have chosen their side. If HBO rushes this ritual, if the camera treats it as an action beat instead of a slow desecration, the entire spine of the saga bends. The prophecy becomes a line of dialogue instead of a sentence pronounced over a grave. The Elder Wand's later drama loses its root in this first clash of twin cores. Harry's blood becomes a plot convenience rather than the terrible, intimate fact that his mother's love lives inside the man who killed her. The adaptation must let the silence breathe, must let the knife glint, must let the earth of that graveyard feel cold and real. Because the next scene HBO cannot afford to mishandle depends on this one landing with full weight. The night when another prophecy is explained, another wand is tested, and another boy stands in a room where no rescue is coming. The graveyard is the answer to that room. The echo of a mother's love must be met by the resurrection of the thing that tried to kill it. Tonight, we move from remembered sacrifice to living horror, to the scene that quietly turns the entire story from childhood adventure into war. In the book, the pacing of that turn is mercilessly calm. The portkey does not explode into chaos, it drops. A thud on cold earth, a strange graveyard, a name on a stone that Harry does not yet understand. Cedric's death is not framed as a duel, not even as a moment of struggle. It is a bored instruction, a flash of green, a body falling like an afterthought while Harry is still trying to understand where they have landed. This is important. The world does not slow down to mourn the first boy Voldemort kills with his returned wand. From there, the ritual unfolds with a priestly patience that HBO must not rush. Harry's confusion stretches, tightens as he is dragged to the base of Tom Riddle Sr.'s grave and bound. Bone of the father unknowingly given. Flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed. Blood of the enemy forcibly taken. Each ingredient is named, claimed, and taken in sequence, as if the universe itself is acknowledging a contract. The grave was empty of comfort. It becomes an altar. Here, the story demands body horror, not spectacle. Wormtail's shaking hand, the knife, the wet sound as fingers meet stone. The cauldron bubbling thick and unnatural, the steam clinging like breath. Harry's blood pulled against his will, the cut precise, the magic old and intimate, and in that cauldron the grotesque, infant-like replica of Voldemort's form, a thing that is somehow both helpless and obscene, lowered into the brew before he rises, fully formed, fully alive, fully wrong. When the wands meet, the graveyard becomes a thesis on wand lore. Twin cores. Phoenix feather to phoenix feather. The beam of locked magic, the golden thread. The reversed echoes of Voldemort's victims stepping from his wand in defiance of time. This is not merely a visual trick. It is the quiet beginning of the Elder Wand's story. The first hint that allegiance is not about power shouted, but about power resisted. Harry's wand refuses to behave as Voldemort expects, and somewhere the future duel in the Great Hall is already being written. And through all of this, he is alone. No Dumbledore, who had always appeared at the last possible moment. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from one ruin and might have carried him from this one. Not Sirius, who had promised to be a parent and is instead an ocean away. Just a boy tied to a gravestone, listening to a resurrected monster recite his history as if reading from a ledger. HBO must let this breathe. Every cutaway, every quip, every hurried camera movement would cheapen the sense that the world has just shifted on its axis and cannot be shifted back. The graveyard resurrection is the night the prophecy stops being theory and becomes blood on stone. The moment when magic proves it can remake flesh as easily as it can destroy it. If they honor that slow, sacred horror, then what follows, the Ministry's veils, the tower's falls, the forest's walk, will feel like consequences, not coincidences. And there is another scene, later, where death and return meet in a place that is not quite King's Cross and not quite heaven, a white room where an old man waits with the final truth. That white room will matter later. But before Harry can meet the architect of his story in that place between, he has to stand in a graveyard and watch death speak through light. The grave in Little Hangleton is not empty. It holds Tom Riddle Sr.'s bones, the dust of a family line Voldemort has already consumed. Over that grave, two wands meet, and the magic between them does something it should not. A jet of green collides with a jet of red, and instead of one boy falling, a golden thread of light binds them, wand to wand, hand to hand, hatred to resistance. The beams lock. The air thickens. A dome of molten light swells outward from the point of contact, humming, shuddering, a trembling sphere that turns the graveyard into a sealed arena where the only law is which will breaks first. This is important, because in that instant, Harry is not dueling. He is being forced to hold on, to endure, to let the wands decide which story will continue. And then the spell begins to reverse. Not Dumbledore, who had lectured about wand lore and twin cores, could have prepared him for the way Voldemort's wand starts to cough up its own past. Cedric First, still in the clothes he died in, the shock of his murder clinging to him like fog. Frank Bryce, bewildered and steady. Bertha Jorkins, broken and dazed. Each shade an imprint. Not a charm, not a replica, but the residue of a killing curse that refused to vanish. This is the pattern interrupt of Harry's life. The dead do not appear in the order he loved them, but in the order Voldemort destroyed them. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the air is full, crowded with the consequences of one man's magic. Last of all, James and Lily step from the wand. Not from Harry's longing, as in the Mirror of Erised, but from Voldemort's own history of murder. In the mirror, Harry saw his parents as a silent crowd, a tableau of impossible comfort, a boy pressing his hands to cold glass. Here, they move, they circle him, they speak, they strategize, not as fantasy, but as accusation made tender. You are alive, because he killed us. Lily was a charms prodigy, and even in death her presence functions like a spell. She and James do not simply reassure, they instruct. They tell Harry when to break the connection, how to run, how to let the shades form a shield between him and the man who ended their lives. Harry is literally covered by the people Voldemort killed, their forms streaming from the wand and closing ranks, a living wall of sacrifice around a boy who has not yet chosen to die. If HBO reduces this to a ghostly cameo, it will miss the moral geometry of the scene. The order of emergence matters. The way the shades move around Harry, not beside him, matters. The fact that they are tethered to Voldemort's wand, not Harry's heart, matters most of all. Because this is rehearsal, the first time Harry walks toward death with his parents at his side, the first time love and sacrifice make a corridor through terror and say, quietly, go, in the forest. Years later, he will not have a wand connection to blame. He will choose it, and the voices that guide him there will echo this night in the graveyard, where death itself began to speak backwards. And this is where speed becomes its own kind of curse. Because if the forest is Harry's chosen surrender, the graveyard is his forced initiation, and the entire saga hangs on how long we are made to stand there with him. Imagine a version built for haste. Cedric falls, the words "kill the spare" barely land, and the camera is already moving, already circling, already climbing into a frantic score. The body is a prop, not a grave. The ritual snaps past in a blur of green and fire, bone and blood reduced to visual noise, and Voldemort rises as if from a trapdoor, not from a decade of whispered dread and half-remembered nightmares. This is important because without that slow, almost reverent unfolding, Voldemort is not the Dark Lord who has warped every adult in Harry's life. He is a boss fight. A creature of choreography, not of prophecy. Not Dumbledore, who had spent years speaking of a fear so great it changed government policy. Not Hagrid, who had wept in a hut on a rock as he told a baby's story. If the resurrection feels like just another spectacle, the terror that shaped their choices begins to look like overreaction. The damage does not stop there. The graveyard is where Wandlaw steps out of the shadows and quietly announces that magic has rules older than any duel. Priori incantatem is not a glitch. It is a revelation that wands remember allegiance, that spells leave echoes. That power is constrained by bonds no one fully understands. Treat it as an accident, a random golden beam between replicas of light, and years later, when the Elder Wand refuses to kill its true master, the twist will feel arbitrary. An author's convenience rather than the inevitable consequence of buried lore. Harry's arc fractures too. In the book, the shades of his parents do not simply appear, they arrive in order, they speak in turn, they steady his hand. It is the Mirror of Erised made terrible and real, the illusion of family replaced by a moment in which the dead stand with him and then must leave. If the scene rushes past, if their words are drowned beneath the score, then his walk into the forest loses its rehearsal. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but here, for one impossible minute, it is full, and he learns how to go on when it empties again. And beneath all this lies a quieter, more chilling question. If the resurrection of the Dark Lord can be rushed, what else in this story will be treated as expendable spectacle rather than sacred turning point? If this ritual becomes noise, what happens when we reach the Hallows, the Vale, the final duel in the Great Hall? What happens when death itself is asked to move faster for the sake of the schedule? The graveyard was not the end. It was a rehearsal. A proof of concept that death in this story would have rules and blood and ritual. But Harry's real education in loss does not finish among the tombstones and bone. It finishes behind a stone arch in the bowels of the Ministry. This is important. From the beginning, his contact with the dead has been softened by mercy and by magic. In the Mirror of Erised, he sees his parents not as they died, but as they might have lived, a silent crowd of Potters standing whole and waiting. A dream he can visit whenever he chooses. In the graveyard of Little Hangleton, the Priori Incantatem charm gives him wand echoes, replicas of the murdered speaking, encouraging, promising that help can still arrive. Even his parents' names on the grave in Godric's Hollow offer a kind of structure. There is a stone, there are dates, there is a place for grief to stand. The grave was empty. The series has already told us over and over that what Harry clings to is not bodies, but images, reflections, illusions, memories in a pensive. Ghosts at the edge of a wand's golden thread. Not Dumbledore, who had tried to teach him that to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins and wept over what he believed was a complete, comprehensible tragedy. Not Sirius, who had offered himself as the living answer to Harry's orphaned childhood. None of them prepare him for a doorway that does not give anything back. So when he chases the false vision of Sirius into the Department of Mysteries, he is not simply running into a trap. He is pursuing the same pattern that has always saved him. If he can only reach the image, the echo, the person he loves in time, the story will bend. The plan will hold. Rescue will arrive. Instead, he finds the Death Chamber. A sunken amphitheatre, stone worn in places no one remembers building, and at its centre a tattered archway with a black curtain that hangs in air without moving air. The veil whispers. Not to everyone. Only to those who stand too close, who are already carrying more dead than their years should allow. It is a threshold made visible, a piece of cosmic architecture that the Ministry has fenced off but never understood, older than the war and perhaps older than the building around it. Sirius dies almost quietly. A flash of green, a look of surprise, and then he falls through the veil as if through water that does not splash. No broken body, no battlefield last words, no funeral. Only an empty arch, and a silence that answers Harry's screams with nothing at all. This is where childhood ends. Harry learns that sometimes there is no body to bury, no goodbye to speak, no explanation to cling to. Only a doorway that does not return what it takes. HBO cannot afford to render this as mere scenery. The veil must feel like a question the story itself is afraid to ask, so that when the Hallows appear, when Harry walks into his own forest, we remember the first time a boy stood before a curtain and understood that magic could not fix what lay beyond. To earn that doorway, the story has to walk us through the maze that surrounds it. The veil is not a jump scare. It is the quiet center of a storm. And the storm begins the moment the children step into the Department of Mysteries and the doors start to spin. The circular room is the first betrayal. Every door identical, the walls revolving with a soft, traitorous whisper, orientation stripped away until direction becomes a matter of faith rather than knowledge. This is important. The Ministry's deepest level cannot feel like a simple corridor to a boss battle. It must feel like a charm constructed to erase certainty itself. A place where even the architecture refuses to pick a side. From there, the journey fragments. A room of tanks where pale brains drift like grotesque flowers, tendrils of thought that can wrap around a boy's arm and show him that ideas can maim as surely as curses. A chamber where time is bottled, reversed, shattered, the bell jar with the bird that is egg that is bird again. The smashed hourglasses spilling sand that does not behave as sand should. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the grave is time itself, dissected on a table. Magic is not wonder in these rooms, it is specimen. HBO must preserve that clinical strangeness, the sense that somewhere, long before Harry was born, unspeakables reduced miracles to data. Not Dumbledore, who had always wrapped his explanations in metaphor. Not Hagrid, who had called everything he did not understand brilliant and left it there. Here, magic is charted, labelled, pierced with instruments. The children are intruders in a laboratory that studies the machinery of fate. At the center of this machinery waits the prophecy. A dusty orb with Harry's name on it, fragile as spun sugar, containing a sentence that has already been spoken, already heard, already set the world on fire. The battle that follows is, in truth, a tug-of-war over an echo. A replica of knowledge Voldemort half knew the night he chose the boy in the cot. That irony must be palpable, grown wizards tearing a room apart over words that cannot be unsaid. Against this, the tone must remain brutally small. Teenagers improvising, shouting to one another, losing track of where anyone is. Doors slammed, doors locked, doors forgotten. Spells ricochet off shelves, glass explodes, someone falls and does not immediately rise. Who is winning? The story should not answer at once. This confusion matters because Sirius's death has to arrive like one more stray catastrophe in a cascade of them. A misstep, a flash, a fall. Only when the noise recedes does the absence harden into truth. If HBO over-choreographs this sequence, turns it into clean, superhero-style combat with elegant duels and clear lines, the cost will be immense. The Department of Mysteries must feel like a machine the children do not understand, grinding on with or without them, so that when the curtain closes, we believe that the war itself is indifferent. And from that indifference, the next betrayal will rise. Indifference is the machinery. The veil is the grave it built for itself. And in that circular chamber, HBO has one chance to make death feel irreversible again. The archway is nothing at first. Stone, a tattered curtain. A ruin abandoned in the middle of a room where magic has been stripped of names. This is important. Harry's fascination in the book is not spectacle, but recognition without understanding. He hears whispers where others hear only silence, feels that tug in his chest that is not a charm, not a curse, but something older. He steps closer, because he is certain that if he just leans in, if he just listens, The voices will resolve into words and the story will finally make sense. And then Luna, quiet, self-contained Luna, says that she hears them too. That moment matters more than any special effect. Two children marked by death, standing before a curtain, realizing that whatever calls to them is not madness, it is kinship. HBO must hold on their faces, on the way the others do not react. Because not everyone is invited to that threshold. Not Dumbledore, who had mapped so many frontiers of magic. Not Hagrid, who had carried bodies from battlefields and never once heard the dead call his name. When Sirius falls, it has to feel like the veil answering back. No slow-motion heroics, no operatic blast. Just the flash of Bellatrix's curse, the almost bored efficiency of it. The way Sirius's expression is not one of agony, but of startled interruption, as if the sentence of his life has been cut off mid-word. His body arcs, not flung but drawn, as though the curtain has been waiting for him and simply closes around what it has claimed. Then the silence. No impact, no cry, no body on the floor. The grave was empty because the veil does not leave replicas. It does not negotiate. The denial must be unbearable. Harry calling. Waiting. Insisting that Sirius will step back through at any second. That this is just another trick of magic, another door. Lupin's arms around him are not restraint alone. They are knowledge. Every adult in that room understands at once what Harry cannot accept, because they have lived long enough to know the difference between wounds and endings. They knew. He does not. Not yet. And the series' own logic has to tighten here. No ghost drifting from the arch. No portrait prepared in some ancestral home. No priori incantatem echo in a later duel. Sirius is simply gone, and the veil refuses to explain where. In a universe where Lily was a charms prodigy, where protection can twist curses and a boy can walk out of a killing spell alive, this one boundary must not move. HBO cannot over-literalize it. No glowing portal, no visible afterlife. The horror lies in the not knowing, in the way the arch looks like any ruin until you touch it and understand too late that it is a one-way door. If they flinch here, if they soften the edge of that absence, then what follows? The prophecy, the hallows, the last walk into the forest will lose its weight, because the next betrayal is not only of trust, it is of death itself. HBO will be tempted to look away from that absence, to fill it, to explain. To decide that if there is a door, then there must be something on the other side that can be rendered in light and sound and dialogue. You can almost see the missteps forming in a production meeting. A brief shimmer of translucent forms behind the veil, shapes that resemble the dead, reaching, an unspeakable stepping forward after Sirius falls, voice low and grave, delivering a quiet lecture on liminal planes and soul migration. A plaque at the base of the arch, naming it as an experimental device from some lost department, a malfunctioning charm that went too far. The mystery translated into a mechanism, the unknown reduced to law. This is important, because the books resist that impulse with a kind of ferocity. The arch is there before language. It feels older than the ministry that houses it, older than wizarding government itself, as if the building were raised around a wound they did not know how to heal. No one truly understands it, not Dumbledore, who had an opinion, a theory, an explanation for almost every piece of magic Harry ever encountered. Not Hagrid, who had carried a body out of another ruin and would have given anything for a door he could walk through to fetch it back. The veil stands in the center of the story like a stone that refuses to be carved into meaning. Contemporary audiences have been trained to expect the opposite. They want systems, charts, maps of the afterlife. They want every grave labeled and every charm footnoted. If a wand does something strange, they ask why. If a spell echoes, they demand the rulebook. But death is not a system problem the narrative is meant to solve. Some questions must remain unanswered, or the weight of every loss in this story begins to thin, like a ghost stretched too far. Think of the pattern Rowling has already built. The Mirror of Erised gives Harry a replica of what he wants most: parents who stand beside him, who look at him with pride and recognition. Priori Incountatem in the graveyard offers another mercy, those pale green echoes that circle him and speak just long enough to guide his hand. Comforting illusions, temporary returns, the magic bends again and again to let him hear the voices of the dead without ever truly crossing over. The veil is the first time the story refuses. No mirror image, no wand-lit echo, only a fluttering curtain and a fall that does not reverse. The grave was empty of explanation, and that emptiness is the point. So the question becomes a test. If HBO cannot bear to leave the veil unexplained, if it cannot trust the silence in that room, how will it endure the silence of King's Cross when Harry asks Dumbledore whether it is all in his head and receives at last an answer that is not an answer at all? If King's Cross is the question that refuses to resolve, then Snape's pensieve is the answer that cannot be undone. Once Harry steps from the stone arch of the veil to the silver surface of those memories, the story itself crosses a threshold. It cannot go back. Across 7 books, he has been trained for this kind of looking. The Mirror of Erised taught him the seduction of reflection, the way a boy could stand in front of polished glass and see parents who were not alive, a family that was not coming back, a grave that might as well have been a doorway. The pensieve in 4th year showed him other people's trials and sentences. Barty crouched Junior screaming as he fell through his own history. The graveyard in Little Hangleton forced him to watch Voldemort rise from cauldron and bone to witness blood magic made visible. The veil revealed that death is a curtain, not a wall. This is important. Each time, Harry has looked further past the surface, further past what any child should have to see. Now he will look into the mind of the man who has been both tormentor and guardian. Not Dumbledore, who had offered carefully curated truths and withheld the rest. Not Hagrid, who had brought him into the magic world but never seen its deepest bargains. Not Sirius, who had loved him fiercely but died before the final accounting. Severus Snape is different. His interior life is the last locked room in the castle. The setup is brutal in its simplicity. The shrieking shack, Nagini's strike, a man bleeding out on warped floorboards while the war rages outside. Tears instead of blood, silver instead of red. Harry catching them in a flask, not yet understanding that he is holding the distilled record of a lifetime. Then, the quiet of the headmaster's office, the ruined portraits, the familiar stone basin waiting. He pours the tears into the pensieve, and the surface becomes a trembling mirror of liquid memory. From this point, nothing is mere exposition. Once he plunges in, his understanding of his parents, of Dumbledore, of Snape himself, will never return to innocence. He will see Lily as a girl at the riverbank, before she was a mother, before she was a symbol. He will see James as bully and beloved, hero and flaw, no longer a shining replica on a chocolate frog card, but a boy whose choices left scars. He will see Dumbledore's plan laid bare, the arithmetic of sacrifice that measured Harry's life against Voldemort's fall. And he will learn why he lived, why he must die, who has been loving him in the shadows with a devotion so narrow and relentless it warped an entire life. Lily was a charms prodigy, but the protection on Harry's blood is not the only legacy she leaves in these memories. There is also the catastrophic echo of being loved by someone who never stopped standing at her grave. HBO will have to render a cascade of memories, childhood, adolescence, war, without losing the single, devastating through line. Every scene bends back toward a boy's promise and a woman's death. Can they cut from a playground argument to a dark mark? From a Patronus in a headmaster's office to a body on a shack floor, and keep the thread unbroken? The grave was empty of easy villains and simple saints. These memories must honor that emptiness. Because when Harry emerges from the pensieve, he will walk straight toward the forest, carrying the knowledge that he has always been both weapon and son. The next scene depends on this one being intact. To honor that emptiness, the pensieve must not blink. Not once. Not for comfort, not for pacing, not for spectacle. It begins on a playground that feels like a grave waiting to be filled. A thin boy in too big clothes watches two sisters spin on a rusting roundabout, the air shivering when the younger, red-haired one makes the flower petals close and open with a thought. This is important. The show must linger on Snape in the bushes, half hidden, half hungry, watching Lily's first shared magic with a look that is not yet love and not yet obsession, but the desperate recognition of someone who has finally seen a door out of his own house. They cannot soften the house. The shouting through thin walls, the crash of a bottle. The way Tobias Snape's rage makes even the wallpaper seem afraid. The camera must understand that Hogwarts is not just a school to him, it is an escape tunnel. Lily was a charms prodigy, but before she is that, she is a girl on a swing who smiles at the strange boy and listens when he whispers about a castle where they can both be more than what their parents have made of them. Then the years accelerate. The Sorting Hat's cry of Slytherin. That cuts the carriage in two. Snape drawn toward older students who know curses, who talk of power and purity, who offer him a place where his sharpness is an asset instead of a wound. The rift with Lily must be gradual and visible. Her frown as he laughs at a cruel joke, her refusal to excuse the dark arts as just knowledge, her repeated warnings that his new friends are not playing. Not Dumbledore, who had always spoken of choices, but Lily, who names the choice in front of him and watches him turn away. And then the courtyard. Sunlight, laughter, a lake in the distance, and humiliation sharpened into a slur. The word he hurls at her must feel like a curse that rebounds on him, the worst memory because it is the moment he shatters the only bridge that ever led him out of himself. If HBO flinches here, if they make it too quick, too bloodless, the later devotion curdles into sentimentality instead of penance. From there, the moral architecture tightens, a dark hallway, a door left ajar. Snape hears a fragment of prophecy and carries it to Voldemort, thinking in abstractions, the child, the one, never imagining that the story he is feeding will circle back to the girl on the swing. This is important. We must see the instant he understands that the boy is Lily's boy, that his information is not merely dangerous, but fatal. The plea to Dumbledore is not dignified. It cannot be. He is on his knees, voice-breaking, offering anything, everything, begging for Lily's life with no thought for James, with barely a thought for the child. Not Hagrid, who had carried that child from the ruins, but Snape, who helped light the fuse, now clawing at the blast he set off. When Dumbledore later demands that he protect Harry for her, the agreement must feel less like a noble vow and more like a life sentence he chooses because the alternative is unendurable. All of this converges on a single image, a silver doe stepping out of darkness. The Patronus reveal only has weight if the audience has walked every corridor that leads there. When Dumbledore asks, after all this time, it must not play as a meme or a slogan, but as an indictment and a benediction in one breath. Always is not romantic. It is a confession that he has never escaped the moment he failed her, that every cruel word to Harry, every occlumency lesson, every risk taken as a double agent is a stone laid on his own chest. The grave was empty of simple redemption. The pensieve must show that his love is real precisely because it is not clean. If HBO trims these memories into a highlight reel, if they reduce his life to a twist instead of a tragedy, then Harry's walk into the forest loses its shadow twin. The knowledge that another man once chose a different kind of death in service to the same child. And beyond that, in this alternate world where two other parents are still alive, these memories become even more volatile. For somewhere, James and Lily are watching too, seeing the boy they once tormented and the man who now guards their son. And the next decision they make will depend on whether HBO dares to show every wound. What happens when the living parents of Harry Potter finally confront the man who has been dying for him in secret, always? Snape has been dying for Harry in secret. But he has also been killing parts of Harry, one lesson at a time. This is important. If HBO lets sentimentality swallow that paradox, the grave of his character will be just as false as the one in Godric's Hollow. The danger is simple and seductive, to frame Severus Snape as a secret, flawless hero, a misunderstood guardian whose cruelty was only camouflage. Yet the books never grant him that mercy. He mocks Neville's terror, savors Hermione's tears, belittles Harry not only as James's son, but as an orphan who looks too much like the man he hated. He enjoys the power he has over children. The magic of his arc is that he is both necessary and deeply unsafe. In this alternate history, where James and Lily are alive and watching, that edge must cut deeper, not softer. They knew him as the boy who chose dark magic over their friendship, who hurled the word mudblood like a curse. Snape's complicity in Death Eater circles, his willingness to bring the prophecy to Voldemort, cannot become a hazy, aesthetic backstory. If the adaptation rushes to redeem him, to smooth his sneer into a tragic mask, the story's moral spine snaps. Not Dumbledore, who had used Snape as a double agent, not Hagrid, who had trusted Dumbledore's word, and not Sirius, who had only ever seen the bully in black, are allowed to be entirely right. But none of them are entirely wrong. The second temptation is the love story. Lily was a charms prodigy, a girl who built protections out of theory and stubbornness, not a prize on a shelf of male regret. If the series turns her into a mere object of Snape's devotion, a silent portrait in his mind, it erases her choice. She chose James. She rejected the ideology and obsession that Snape embraced. In this AU, that choice is even sharper. She has faked her own death to save her son, while Snape has faked his own emotional death to survive his guilt. That is why the pensive memories must keep their ugliness. We need to see his obsession, the way he clings to Lily's memory as if it were a charm against his own corruption. We need his bitterness, his contempt for others, his willingness to endanger students and colleagues if it serves the private altar he has built to her. Only then does his promise to protect Harry, made on a night when the grave was empty and the replicas still warm, feel like penance instead of romance. Through the AU lens, Snape has been moving like a ghost who knows he is still alive, haunting the edges of Harry's life as if he had already forfeited the right to be fully human. The pensive is where we finally see the body he has been hiding. Every choice, every cruelty, every compromised act laid out in cold memory. If HBO turns always into a simple, romantic catchphrase, will it still hurt the way it is supposed to? So how do you film a man's entire life in minutes without losing the grave weight of what it cost him? The answer begins with a doorway, a frame inside the frame. A man who is always almost inside and never allowed to cross. The sequence should open not on swirling pensive liquid, but on Snape in a narrow doorway at Spinner's End, a thin boy watching Lily make a flower bloom in her hand. Lily was a charms prodigy, her magic bright against the drab grey estate. The room beyond him is warmer than the corridor where he stands, the light on her face is soft, the light on his is flat. This is important. The camera holds the threshold, establishing a visual motif Snape as witness never guessed. Color and light must do the work that exposition cannot. Childhood should feel almost colorless, washed in sickly greens and industrial grey, the air heavy with damp and shouted arguments. Then, Hogwarts, warmer but tense, the corridors lit by candles that throw long uncertain shadows. Not safety. Potential in the war years, that warmth drains away into cold blue-white war rooms in Grimmauld Place and the headmaster's office. The kind of light that makes every line on a face look like a sentence passed. Viewers should know where they are in time before a single date is spoken. But the memories must never become detached vignettes. Harry has to haunt them. Each time the camera slips into the memory, it should cut back, however briefly, to Harry standing beside the pensive, flinching as his father becomes a bully by the lake, recoiling when he hears the prophecy, going still when he watches Snape on the hill above Godric's Hollow. The grave was empty in that vision, and only Snape and the audience knew why. His presence anchors the story. These are not neutral archives. They are a direct assault on everything he thought was true. The temptation for a prestige series will be to scramble the chronology, to be clever with time. They cannot. The power lies in the build. A lonely boy at a playground, a first meeting on a riverbank, humiliation under the Marauders' wands. The choice of the dark mark. The horror when he understands what the prophecy means. The desperate bargain with Dumbledore. A boy becoming a man who chooses a life sentence of guilt. Break that line, and you break the truth of his sacrifice. And always the doorway. Snape in the doorway of the headmaster's office as Dumbledore turns away. Snape in the doorway of the ruined cottage, framed against the night, howling over a replica body that looks like the woman he destroyed. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated the plan. Not Hagrid, who had carried the real child away. Not Sirius, who had gone hunting a traitor. Only Snape sees the cost in that threshold. The sequence must end in stillness. After the silver doe glides through the forest and Dumbledore whispers, "After all this time," the series should resist music, resist movement. Hold on Dumbledore's face as understanding and horror meet, then cut to Harry's, wet with tears in the present, breathing too fast in the quiet room. Let always fall into the silence like a stone into deep water, the ripples spreading backward through 6 seasons of story. Then, and only then, should the world move again. Because what follows can only matter if the audience has stood in that doorway with him and refused to look away. The room exhales. The memory light gutters out. And in the hollow that follows Snape's always, Harry understands the one thing no prophecy, no mentor, no parent ever told him outright: he has to die. This is important, not in the abstract, not as metaphor, but as cold magical arithmetic. Snape's memories have given him the final sum. The fragment of Voldemort's soul lives in him. He is a walking Horcrux, a living grave carrying someone else's broken piece. Every earlier brush with death, the Mirror of Erised's promise, the basilisk's venom, the graveyard's green fire, was rehearsal. This is the performance. Now he walks toward it fully conscious. He leaves the castle. He leaves his name. No wand raised, no shield charm ready. No plan except obedience to the terrible logic of the magic that saved him as a child. The forest receives him, as it has received so many bodies in this war, but he is uniquely, terribly alive. He thinks of his parents, of the replicas he has seen only in photographs and reflections, and of how often he has tried to step through glass or stone to reach them. The grave was empty of answers. The forest will not be. Voldemort speaks the words that have stalked Harry's life. Avada Kedavra. A flash of green, a rushing void, and then white mist silence. He is lying on what feels like polished stone. Though it is too clean, too bright, too empty to be any earthly flaw. He is naked and unhurt, body intact, scar quiet, as if the curse had passed through him and burned only what did not belong. Somewhere nearby, under a distant bench in this strange gleaming station, something small and flayed and whimpering struggles for breath. It is a creature and a consequence, a Horcrux without a host. Harry stands in King's Cross, or the idea of King's Cross, stripped of smoke and crowds and timetable boards. Remade in the colour of bone and early morning fog, it is the anti-veil. Where the death chamber in the ministry was stone and shadow and a curtain that swallowed sound, this place is all light and echo. The veil offered no explanation, only absence. Here, explanation waits on every platform. And then Dumbledore is there, alive, whole, no withered hand, no fall from a tower in his eyes. Not Dumbledore, who had withheld and delayed and arranged Harry's life like pieces on a chessboard. This Dumbledore sits opposite him, robes clean, gaze unclouded, and for the first time in 7 books worth of story, ready to speak without riddles. He will talk of Hallows and Horcruxes, of Ariana and Grindelwald, of why Harry's walk into the forest changed the shape of death itself. He will finally answer the questions the veil refused. Yet even here there is a catch. Perhaps it is all in Harry's head. Perhaps this is nothing but his own magic, his own longing, building a station out of memory so he can choose his next train. What does it mean if the clearest truth he ever hears comes from a man who might be no more than a thought? For HBO, this is the still point of the entire saga. time must feel suspended, the war held just outside the white mist as the story itself steps aside to ask what it has been about. Power or mercy, survival or sacrifice, the right to go on or the grace to stop. If King's Cross is rushed, if it is reduced to exposition or spectacle, then Snape's memories were only shock value, and the forest only a set. Because the real question is not whether Harry died. The real question is what he chose when Dumbledore pointed to the trains and asked him, very quietly, what he wanted to do next. And that choice, if HBO understands it, will decide how they stage the final return to the battle and the last time Harry Potter turns to face death. And that choice leads him not back to the forest, not yet, but to a place without walls or sky. A white, echoing King's Cross where everything is clean and nothing is simple. Tonight, we step into that station. Because if HBO mishandles this conversation, the entire story tilts off its axis. The grave was empty. This is important. The boy who thought he had died finds that he is still somehow alive, lying on a floor that looks like polished stone and mist at once, listening to the distant suggestion of trains. And there is Dumbledore, waiting, whole and calm, in a space that is neither afterlife nor dream, but a liminal chamber where magic and conscience finally tell the truth. Here, explanations are not exposition, they are confessions. Dumbledore speaks of the Hallows, not as shiny artifacts for a quest, but as a pattern of temptation that once ensnared him. The Elder Wand, its allegiance sliding not to the wizard who killed, but to the wizard who disarmed. The blood in Harry's veins, carrying Lily's protection into Voldemort's resurrected body so that every curse he casts at Harry rebounds through a bond he never understood. The killing curse in the forest, destroying only the fragment of Voldemort's soul inside Harry. Because the protection and the wand and the chosen sacrifice formed a net even death could not cut. Then Dumbledore steps backward into his own grave. He speaks of Godric's Hollow and a girl named Ariana whose magic exploded inward. Of Grindelwald, the friend who became a dark mirror. Of youthful letters filled with language about the greater good. And a duel in which his brilliance killed his sister and left him with a guilt so deep that the Order of Merlin felt like a mockery. Not Dumbledore, who had guided Harry for years, but Albus, the boy who once wanted mastery over death and power over muggles, stands naked in that whiteness. The moral core rests on a simple contrast. Dumbledore chased the Hallows to command death. Harry walks into the forest to meet it. Dumbledore insists, almost pleading, that Harry is the better man precisely because he chose to die without bargaining for invincibility, without reaching for the wand, the stone, the cloak as trophies. Lily was a charms prodigy, but here it is Harry's unadorned courage that becomes the final protection. A living charm woven from choice rather than spellwork, and under the bench, shivering and flayed, lies the creature. A twisted, gasping replica of Voldemort's soul, too damaged to be comforted, too far gone to be saved. Harry wants to help. Dumbledore tells him he cannot. This is the cost of refusing repentance, the limit of compassion in a universe where magic cannot overwrite will. HBO must let this scene breathe. No frantic cutting, no visual spectacle to distract from the silence. Just two figures in the white, the distant sound of trains, and the unbearable pause before Harry decides whether to board or go back to the battle and to the last reckoning with Voldemort's borrowed immortality. And then, in the white silence, Dumbledore says the line that holds the whole scene together. The line HBO cannot afford to misunderstand. Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real? It sounds simple. It is not. It is a quiet argument against the idea that only what can be weighed and measured matters. A reminder that in a world built on magic and memory, the inner landscape can be as binding as any unbreakable vow. This is important. The temptation for television will be to decide, to show Harry's soul leaving his body as a streak of light, to cut back to the Great Hall and have someone gasp that he is gone, that something in the air has shifted, to give us an external confirmation that King's Cross is a literal way station between life and death, a place on some celestial map. That is the easy plan. It is also the wrong one. Because the books refuse to draw that border. King's Cross is written as a threshold where dream and afterlife blur, where Harry's subconscious and some larger, older truth occupy the same blank platform. The flayed replica of Voldemort's soul lies under a bench like a wounded animal. Dumbledore walks without his broken hand. The grave was empty, and yet something is undeniably there. The story stands at the edge of the grave and declines to look all the way in. This ambiguity has been prepared for years. The Mirror of Erised shows Harry parents who speak and move, yet vanish when he turns his back, an image that may be pure longing, or something answering that longing. The veil in the Department of Mysteries whispers to those who listen, a stone arch that might be a doorway or only an echo chamber for grief. Priori Incantatum in the graveyard pulls shimmering shades from Voldemort's wand, replicas of the dead who give guidance and comfort. Are they ghosts, memories, or wand magic made visible? Not Dumbledore, who had studied death his entire life, can say for certain. King's Cross is the only time the narrative admits its own uncertainty. Harry asks if it is real. Dumbledore does not answer with doctrine, only with that unsettling reassurance that reality is not limited to what other people can verify. In a universe where love leaves protections on skin and in blood, where a mother's sacrifice lingers like a charm over a child's life, how could it be otherwise? If HBO pins this down, labels it heaven, or a soul halt, or a confirmed out-of-body experience, it will close the door the books deliberately left ajar. It will end the arguments at bedsides and in classrooms, the long, aching debates about whether Harry truly died or only came as close as anyone can while still alive. It will make the grave tidy. The story is stronger when the line stays blurred, when we are not entirely sure what Harry saw, only that it changed him. And there is one final scene at the very end of the battle where that change must be written on his face without a single word explained. He walks out of the white light and back into pain, back into weight, back into a body that has been cursed, broken, and, depending on which scholar you ask, briefly laid in a grave only he could see. This is important. Because the choice Harry makes on that forest floor is not a reflex of bravery, it is a deliberate return to suffering. He knows Voldemort believes he has killed him. He knows the protection has been renewed in the blood of everyone who stood behind him in the castle, and he chooses to go back, to lie still in the dirt like a discarded replica of himself, to let the Dark Lord proclaim victory and drag his corpse home as a trophy. The grave was empty, and yet the boy who should have filled it offers himself as if he were already dead. He trusts, with a faith that no prophecy can fully explain, that love and loyalty will move in the silence after his fall. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated so much and still withheld so much. Not Hagrid, who had carried him out of Godric's Hollow and now will carry what he believes is Harry's body back to the shattered castle. Not Sirius, who had died in the Ministry, vanishing through the veil before he could ever see this last march. None of them can make this decision for him. Harry walks alone. HBO cannot rush what follows. The Battle of Hogwarts is not simply an impressive sequence of spells and falling stone, it is the final testing ground of every quiet scene that came before. When Hagrid carries Harry into the ruined courtyard, when the Death Eaters jeer and the survivors stare at the lifeless body of the boy they thought would save them, the castle itself feels like a grave marker. The Great Hall is full of the dead. Fred, Tonks, Lupin, Colin, unnamed students and teachers. The magic that once made Hogwarts feel like home has been burned down to its foundations. This is not just a duel. It is a war, and the book insists we feel it as war. It cuts between fronts, McGonagall and the statues she summons to life, Neville on the bridge, Molly and Bellatrix locked in a duel that carries the entire weight of motherhood and murder. Giants crashing through the grounds, house elves surging from the kitchens with knives. Between these, there are brief, devastating stillnesses, the Weasleys around Fred's body, the pale forms on the stone floor, the way Harry sees them all before he slips away under the invisibility cloak. The structure matters. The story refuses to let the battle become faceless. We remember the graveyard in Goblet of Fire, the Ministry corridors, and the Veil, the Department of Mysteries, the cave with Dumbledore's withered hand, Snape's memories pouring into the Pensieve. Every thread, prophecy, hallows, horcruxes, friendships, betrayals, deaths converges here, and each demands its own moment of acknowledgement. HBO must treat this not as a single climax, but as a tapestry of miniscenes, each one paying off an old debt. Lily was a charms prodigy, and the protection she placed in Harry's blood is about to ignite across an entire castle of people who chose to stand and fight. The camera will need to move like the book's gaze moves, from one front to another, from chaos to unbearable quiet, always returning to the question, what did this cost? And then, when the time comes for Harry to throw off the cloak in the Great Hall, for the final confrontation to begin, there is one last detail the adaptation cannot afford to mishandle. Because it is the moment the boy who died in the forest stops being a symbol and becomes something far more unsettling. He becomes the one who walks back from his own grave and makes everyone else decide what they truly believe about him. He comes back from his own grave, and the world has to decide. But the choice is not made in a single room or a single speech. It is made across a castle that has become a map of a war, each corridor and courtyard a line in the story of how magic breaks and who is left to pick up the pieces. This is important. HBO cannot allow the Battle of Hogwarts to shrink into a bright, efficient montage. In the books, the castle is not a backdrop for one duel. It is a living, dying organism fighting on many fronts at once. The first shock is the courtyard. stone shuddering under curses, statues coming alive, giants forcing their way through shattered walls, students and teachers and order members driven back and surging forward again as the night lengthens and the air fills with dust and the metallic taste of fear. From there, the war spills into the Great Hall, not yet the place of final victory, but a command center and triage ward. Tables are pushed aside, bodies laid out in rows that look disturbingly like sleeping children. Fred, Remus, Tonks, Colin Creevy, far too small, far too young. Each death is not just a name, each is a different facet of the world Harry is trying to keep alive. Mischief and laughter, hard-won adulthood, new parenthood, stubborn innocence that refused to stay home. Above them, in shadowed corridors, the first key thread snaps. McGonagall versus Snape is not spectacle, it is the severing of a long, uneasy alliance. Not Dumbledore, who had trusted Snape's remorse, not Hagrid, who had always believed in second chances. Here the truth of Snape's divided loyalties must remain unreadable to almost everyone, even as he flees in a storm of shattered glass and green fire. The duel marks the moment Hogwarts itself chooses a side. The Room of Requirement is another front entirely, a crucible where the younger fighters confront the last Horcrux and the last of Draco's hesitation. The fiendfire that consumes the cursed replica of Ravenclaw's diadem is not just wild magic. It is the visible cost of years of cruelty and cowardice burning out of control. The bridge, by contrast, is a narrow, terrifying threshold, where Neville and the others blow it apart beneath the oncoming giants, sacrificing stone to save lives, turning Hogwarts into a broken, defensive maze. Beyond the walls, on the grounds near the Forbidden Forest, the war turns ritualistic. Harry walks to his death. Later, Neville walks out of the crowd to face Nagini, drawing the sword from the hat as if the castle itself had chosen him. His strike ends a thread that began with the prophecy. Harry versus Voldemort in the Great Hall then becomes not a duel of wands alone, but the final knot in a tapestry of broken wands, shattered plans, and quiet acts of courage. Around them all, the house-by-house mobilization must feel vast and stubbornly human. Gryffindors charging, Hufflepuffs holding lines, Ravenclaws calculating angles of defense, Slytherins fracturing between flight and reluctant aid. Teachers stand with them. Order members apparate in flashes of desperate light. House-elves pour from the kitchens with knives and fury, their loyalty no longer a background charm, but a decisive force. Even the castle's own magic answers McGonagall's call, a last, defiant awakening. The grave was empty. The victory cannot feel empty with it. HBO must let hours seem to pass, let hope rise and fall. Let viewers feel the attrition in their bones. Only then will the final, quiet silence of the Great Hall mean what it is meant to mean. Not triumph alone, but the terrible, earned right to go on living in a world that remembers its dead. And there is one more memory of the dead that the series cannot afford to soften, because it rewrites not just the battle, but the man everyone thought they understood. Snape's memories end, and the battle does not pause to let anyone breathe. It moves forward, ruthless, to the deaths that are not symbolic or legendary, but intimate and shattering. This is important. Because if HBO turns these losses into background debris, the story's deepest promise about the cost of war becomes a lie. Fred dies in a corridor, not in a spotlight. There is an explosion, a flash of light that is almost beautiful, and then the world comes down. The books give us the cruel precision of it. Percy, finally laughing with his brother after years of estrangement, the reconciliation still fresh and fragile on his face. A joke, a shared look, then stone and dust and silence. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the grave is instantaneous, carved out of living air as one twin rises and the other does not. The camera must stay. It must watch Percy claw at rubble, must see George arrive and understand in a single, ruined heartbeat that the echo he has lived beside since birth has been cut away. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated plans from a distance. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from one wreckage already. Not Sirius, who had fallen through the veil and vanished. This death is smaller, closer, leaving a Weasley-shaped hollow that no wand, no charm, no clever replica can fill. In the Great Hall, the cost is laid out with terrible order. Remus and Tonks lie side by side, hands almost touching, but not quite. As if even in death they are reaching across a fraction of air they will never cross. The framing must remember what the books made explicit. These are not just fallen fighters, they are new parents who have left a child to grow up with a story that mirrors Harry's own. Another orphan. Another boy who will be told again and again that his parents died for him, that their magic and their love were a shield he will never remember. Remus, who taught Harry the Patronus, who tried to give him a language for fear. Tonks, bright and shifting, now utterly still. Around them, bodies, Colin Creevy's small frame, dragged in from the grounds because he would not stay away. The nameless dead. Students and staff and defenders whose lives were never meant to be grand, only good. The Great Hall becomes a morgue and a chapel at once, stone tables turned into makeshift biers, candles guttering over faces that will not wake. Reaction is everything. Molly's grief cannot be a single scream and a cut, it must be a sustained unmaking, the sound of a mother who has run out of protections to weave. George's face must hold more than tears, it must hold absence, the disorienting sense that his own voice now echoes wrong. Harry, walking among the bodies, should look not heroic but numb, moving as if through water, the boy who knew from a cupboard that death was coming and now sees the full account. From the first mirror in which Harry saw his parents, the series has whispered that love and war will demand a price. Here the bill comes due, in rows of still forms and in the eyes of those left alive. The camera must not look away, because the next memory, the next man, is defined by the one person he could not save and the boy he chose to protect instead. The next memory is not in a pensieve, it is written in fire and blood on the stones of Hogwarts. This is important. Voldemort has called the ceasefire. The defenders stand in a broken line before the castle, lit by the pale, indifferent glow of dawn and wandlight. Bodies lie behind them like a second, silent army. Harry is cradled in Hagrid's arms, apparently lifeless, the story of the Chosen One brought to what looks like a final, cruel full stop. And into that grave-still silence walks Neville Longbottom. Voldemort speaks as he always has, with contempt, with certainty, with the cold amusement of a man who believes the plan is finished and the outcome sealed. He mocks Hogwarts, mocks the dead, mocks the boy who would not die. Then he turns his attention to Neville, binds him with a lazy flick, and drags him forward as an object lesson. Not Dumbledore, who had once spoken of a power the Dark Lord knows not. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from two ruins now. In this moment, Voldemort believes there is no one left alive who matters. Neville knows he is wrong. His voice shakes, but his defiance does not. He speaks Harry's name as if it were a charm against despair. Refuses to join Voldemort, refuses to kneel, refuses to let the last of Dumbledore's army become a replica of the cowed crowds that once watched Death Eaters march. The Dark Lord answers not with Avada Kedavra, but with humiliation. The Sorting Hat is jammed onto Neville's head, a mockery of schoolboy ceremony at the edge of a mass grave. Then the world changes. The hat catches fire, flames lick around the brim, and from that inferno, from that relic of first years and frightened children, the sword of Gryffindor erupts into Neville's waiting hand. The grave was empty, but the House of Bravery was not. In that instant, the camera must see what the books told us. The sword appears to any true Gryffindor in need, and the castle itself has chosen. Neville could strike at Voldemort. Instead, he turns, sees Nagini coiled like a living Horcrux beside her master, and understands the truth Harry died for. The last anchor of Voldemort's immortality, the final piece of a soul that should never have remained alive. His choice is surgical, not theatrical. He swings, and the blade arcs through the air with all the weight of years behind it. This is the symbolic transfer the adaptation cannot dilute. Harry has walked into the forest and offered his life. For a heartbeat, his story appears to end. In that vacuum, Neville steps forward as the one who delivers the decisive blow to the Dark Lord's plan. He does what Harry cannot do, because Harry is busy doing what no one else could. For Neville, this is the culmination of an arc that began with trembling hands and broken remembrals. The shy boy on the Hogwarts Express, the child mocked in Snape's classroom, the student who once feared his own wand, becomes the man who leads Dumbledore's army in the Carrows regime, and then literally severs the head of Voldemort's immortality. Lily was a charms prodigy, but Gryffindor's sword answers to a different kind of magic, stubborn, ordinary courage that refuses to break. HBO must not relegate this stroke to a blurred movement in the background of Harry's final duel. The lens must slow, must listen, must let us hear the rush of breath and the wet thud as Nagini falls. Neville's swing is not incidental, it is a climax in its own right, the moment the war becomes winnable. If the camera blinks, the story lies. Because after Nagini's death, after that headless coil stills on the flagstones, something else begins to move in the shadows of the Great Hall. And the next ruin HBO cannot afford to mishandle is not a serpent, but a wand that never truly belonged to the hand that holds it. The wand that never truly belonged is still being argued over when another older magic erupts on the far side of the hall. Not a prophecy, not a Hallows riddle, a mother's scream. Bellatrix turns her attention from Voldemort's failure to something smaller, something she believes will be easier to break. Ginny Weasley, red hair a living echo of every child Bellatrix has already tried to put in a grave. A jet of green light arcs toward the girl, wild and delighted, the casual cruelty of a woman for whom murder is a game, not a cost. And then the air splits. Not my daughter, you bitch. Molly's voice is not clever, not elegant, not the product of any ancient charm. It is hoarse and raw and utterly unambiguous. This is important. Because in that moment, the battle of theories and wand lore and elder wand allegiance falls silent, and the story remembers what it has always been about, who will stand between a child and the darkness. HBO cannot afford to stage this as spectacle alone. The contrast must be brutal. Bellatrix fights with sadistic glee, laughing, taunting, her curses designed to carve fear before they carve flesh. Molly fights like someone who has mended jumpers and set table places and watched her children walk onto the Hogwarts Express every September knowing they might not come home. Her magic is not showy. It is precise, desperate, grounded in a lifetime of ordinary care. The duel itself should feel like a mother bear mauling a predator, not a meme, not a punchline. Each spell Molly casts needs the weight of earlier pages behind it. The knitted sweaters, the fussing over breakfast, the howler that shakes Ron to his bones. The embrace she gives Harry after the graveyard in Goblet of Fire when nobody else quite knows how to hold him. Not Dumbledore, who had offered explanations. Not Hagrid, who had offered comfort. Not Sirius, who had offered escape. Only Molly had offered home. When her final curse strikes and Bellatrix's laughter cuts off, it cannot feel like a joke. It must feel like a verdict. The replica of aristocratic pure blood power collapses before a witch who has spent most of her life worrying about galleons, not glory. The grave was empty for Lily. She had died once to shield her son. Molly lives and still chooses to kill to shield her daughter. This is the echo. Lily's sacrificial protection in Godric's Hollow, the way her love turns Voldemort's killing curse back on itself, finds its answer here in the Great Hall. Ordinary love against extraordinary evil. A mother who steps forward when every rational plan says she should pull back. The truth of the series is that such love is the deadliest curse of all, and this moment belongs beside the Forest Walk, beside the King's Cross conversation, as one more place where someone decides that protecting a child is worth everything. If HBO dilutes that, if it blinks or flinches, then the next sacrifice will ring hollow, and that sacrifice only lands if the war ends in the open. In the book, the final duel does not vanish into shattered stone and tumbling towers. It walks calmly and inexorably into the Great Hall. The dead are laid out. The living are watching. The grave is inside the castle now, and everyone must see what is buried. This is important. Rowling chooses not a private rooftop chase, not a faceless beam of light over an abyss, but a circle of witnesses, students, teachers, parents, survivors who have already paid in blood. Harry steps forward without his invisibility cloak, without theatrics, and calls Voldemort by his name. He speaks. He explains the Elder Wand, the broken plan, the allegiance that slipped through the Dark Lord's fingers the night Draco Malfoy disarmed Dumbledore. Not Dumbledore, who had believed that knowledge could be a shield, not Snape, who had killed at a grave on a tower, but Draco, shivering and uncertain, became the pivot of all wand lore. In the film, that truth is mostly silent. A chase through empty courtyards, a fall from a height, bodies dissolving like ash on the wind. Spectacle replaces testimony. The book insists on the opposite, that the final confrontation is a trial as much as a duel, that every lie Voldemort has told about power must be answered aloud in front of those he tried to rule. What is victory worth if no one understands why the Dark Lord falls? Harry knew the answer, and he refuses to win on Voldemort's terms. He does not raise the killing curse. He does not mirror the graveyard where a boy was bound to a replica headstone and forced to watch a resurrection. He stands in the light of the hall and chooses Expelliarmus, the schoolboy spell that has become his signature. Voldemort hurls Avada Kedavra, the same sickly green that once rebounded from a crib, and the Elder Wand turns on its master. The difference is absolute. Harry will not become the thing he fights. The Elder Wand twist lives in the details. The explanation of wand allegiance that began in the priori incantatem of the Goblet Graveyard. The slow, terrible realization that the wand in Voldemort's hand has never truly been his. The flash, the bang, the wand arcing through the air, spinning once and flying neatly into Harry's outstretched fingers, while Voldemort's body falls, ordinary and small, onto the stone. No vanishing, no smoke, a corpse. The silence that follows is the point. The community sees that the man who made the world his grave has died of his own obsession. HBO cannot turn that into a wordless, jiggy, heavy storm. If the scene becomes light against light, if the verbal unmasking is stripped away, then the story's last argument about power and knowledge collapses. Magic, in this moment, is less important than truth spoken aloud. The next scene, the next grief, only has weight if everyone in that hall has heard exactly how the war was won. Magic in that hall is only as powerful as the meanings that led there. This is important, because those meanings are not scattered ornaments. They are a single chain, hammered together across 7 scenes that all circle the same grave. The same question of what it costs to stay alive and honest in a world that keeps trying to lie about death. Harry's parents are the first link. In the Mirror of Erised, he meets them as a perfect replica, a silent crowd of impossible relatives offering a life that never was. The scene is temptation disguised as comfort, a charm of reflection and denial. Later, in the graveyard, they return again through priori incantatem, not as fantasy, but as echoes dragged out of Voldemort's wand, bearing knowledge, giving instructions, urging him to run. The illusion thins. By the time he sees them in Snape's memories, they are neither saints nor ghosts, but fallible teenagers, James arrogant and cruel, Lily furious and principled. Not Dumbledore, who had curated a careful legend, not Sirius, who had romanticized the Marauders, ever showed him that. Only in King's Cross does he finally meet them as truth, not present, not speaking, but framed by Dumbledore's confession, by the full admission of how many adults built their plans on his orphaned grief. The story keeps bringing him to thresholds. The veil in the ministry, a literal border of hanging fabric and whispers, is death as unknowable distance. The graveyard is death as spectacle and ritual, a body reborn among bones. King's Cross is death as waiting room, the choice to board a train or walk back. And the forest walk is death as decision, every step an answer to the question Harry has been circling since he first touched that mirror: will you cling to illusion, or will you go forward unarmed? Each time the edge sharpens. Each time he knew a little more. Memory is the instrument that sharpens it. The pensive scenes, from Snape's worst memory to the slow revelation of Dumbledore's youth, insist that the truth arrives late, fragmented, and often when it can no longer spare anyone pain. Lily was a charms prodigy, but no magic she invented could protect Harry from this, that the adults around him built a war on omissions. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins, not Dumbledore, who had designed the plan, gave him the full picture until it was almost over. These 7 scenes are not optional flavor. They are the skeleton of the story's philosophy about living under the shadow of death, about choosing reality over comforting replicas, about love that refuses to lie even when lying would hurt less. If HBO rushes one, sanitizes one, over-explains one, the chain buckles. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. If this adaptation empties these scenes in the same way, everything collapses inward. And there is still one final test of that chain the series has to face. The chain only holds if it catches the heart. Before prophecies, before Horcruxes, before the final charge across a burning courtyard, there was a boy in front of a cold mirror, looking at a family that was not there. The first true hook was not a duel. It was a reflection. The Mirror of Erised is where many readers understood the story had teeth. Harry does not simply see vague happiness, he sees his parents, whole and alive, an impossible replica of a life stolen at a grave in Godric's Hollow. The room is silent, the magic is simple, and yet the temptation is apocalyptic. Stay here, stay with them. Let the illusion become your only truth. This is important. If HBO turns that chapter into a brief visual flourish, a pretty charm with no lingering ache, it severs the first thread that bound children to a book about grief they did not yet have words for. Years later, when those same readers had grown, the hook had to grow with them. Snape's worst memory is not spectacle. It is a moral ambush. The beloved dead father becomes a bully. The awkward, loathed teacher becomes a humiliated child. Lily steps between them, not as a saint, but as a furious, complicated girl whose loyalty has limits. Not Dumbledore, who had preached mercy, could protect Harry from this disillusionment. The grave was empty where his ideal of James once lay. Older readers felt the ground shift, and the series said, "You wanted the truth. Here it is." The final pensive memories complete that rehooking. The Patronus in the forest, the whispered always, the revelation that Snape's life was a long, bitter, broken plan of atonement. Suddenly every previous scene reorders itself. Moral certainty fractures. Children who had become adults by the 7th book found an adult story waiting for them. One that admitted love can be poisonous and still real. HBO must give these memories time to breathe, to unspool slowly, because the power lies not in the twist, but in the rereading of everything that came before. Around these quiet devastations, the graveyard and the Battle of Hogwarts form the visible storms. Voldemort's resurrection, the bone, the blood, the wand answering wand in Priori Incantatem only matter because by then the reader already cares who might die in that circle of light. The final battle, with Fred's body, with Molly's last duel, with Hogwarts itself burning, is not just magic. It is the bill for every earlier attachment coming due. Here, HBO's length is its greatest gift and its greatest risk. A long-form series can linger in empty classrooms, in hospital wings, in corridors, where two people have the sort of quiet, painful conversation that never makes a film cut. But will it dare to stop moving the plot and simply watch a boy stare into a mirror? Will it allow Snape to sit alone in a headmaster's office, the silence saying more than any speech? Somewhere in these pages, every reader cried for the first time. Perhaps at the mirror, perhaps at the graveyard, perhaps at Snape's last memory or on the ruined stone of Hogwarts. That moment was private, unrepeatable, and it is the standard, whether anyone admits it or not. The adaptation does not need to copy your tears, but it must be worthy of them. As we turn to the specific scenes themselves, the question becomes simple and merciless. Can HBO build new hooks strong enough to hold a generation that already knows how the story ends? Cliffhangers are not decorations. They are load-bearing walls, and in Rowling's hands these 7 scenes are placed with the precision of someone who knew exactly when a reader would close the book, look at the clock, and then turn one more page anyway. The Mirror of Erised appears early, almost gently, in a children's book that is already darkening at the edges. A boy finds a mirror in a forgotten classroom and sees his parents, impossibly alive. The grave was empty, yet here they stand, a replica family built of light and longing. This is important. Structurally, that quiet discovery near the middle of Philosopher's Stone is a promise. The story will not simply be about puzzles and house points, but about the unbearable pull of what you most desire. An episode that ends on Harry's stunned reflection, hands pressed to cold glass, would not just be a neat beat, it would be an early thesis for the entire series. Years later, the graveyard in Goblet of Fire is the opposite kind of placement. It is not a hint. It is a brutal full stop at the end of what pretended to be a tournament book. The rhythm of tasks and school gossip collapses into bone, blood, and wand-locked magic as Voldemort rises from the cauldron. Ending an episode there, on the hiss of his first true breath, gives the season a shattering hinge. Anything less, any attempt to tuck the resurrection into the middle of an hour and move briskly on, would drain the ritual of its terror and its function as a point of no return. Order of the Phoenix uses the Ministry battle the same way. The adolescent rebellion that has simmered through detentions and shouted arguments with authority detonates in the Hall of Prophecy. Not Dumbledore, who had warned. Not Hagrid, who had tried to shield. Not Sirius, who had laughed danger away. None of them can stop the moment Harry watches Sirius fall through the veil. That image is not a passing beat. It is a season's last image. The camera must not flinch. The credits must come too soon. Around these anchors, rolling threads delayed detonations. Snape's worst memory does not merely embarrass James, it fractures the myth of the Marauders at the exact point Harry needs his father to be uncomplicated. Much later, the final pensive sequence reveals that the man Harry hated has been guarding him since before he could walk. Mysteries seeded in Book 1 flower in Book 7. Lily was a charms prodigy, but it is Snape's magic of endurance that redefines the war. To scatter these revelations as mid-episode ornament would be to forget that they are the skeleton key to the entire narrative. Even King's Cross, that white echoing pause, is a cliffhanger of another kind. Action stops, but questions multiply. Is Harry dead? Has he chosen to return? What does it mean to walk back into a battle you have already, in some sense, won by dying? Ending an episode on his decision to go back, on the slow turn away from Dumbledore's offered rest, would send viewers into the next hour with dread and fragile hope braided together. This is important. If HBO treats these scenes as mere connective tissue, the series will lose its spine. The plan must be ruthless. Episodes should be built around these moments as anchors, not decorated with them. Because the audience already knows the truth of what happens, the only real suspense left is when and how the blow will fall. The next question, then, is merciless in its own way. What must change, and what must remain almost word forward? For those blows to land, what must remain are the breaks, the fractures. The moments where the story itself seems to stop, look the reader in the eye, and admit that the world has grown more dangerous than anyone wanted to believe. The first real break is a boy in front of a mirror. The school year pattern has been light so far. letters and sweets, Quidditch and house points, the gentle rhythm of lessons and mischief. Then the Mirror of Erised arrives and the castle goes silent. Harry sits alone in the dark, watching a replica of a life he never had, his dead parents moving and smiling as if they were alive. This is important. The scene is not about spectacle, but about stillness, about a child choosing the grave over the dormitory, illusion over sleep. If HBO turns it into a sentimental montage, they will miss that this is the first time Harry is tempted to stay in a dream rather than live in the truth. Years later, the pattern shatters again in a basin of silver memory. Snape's worst memory is not just a flashback, it is a rupture. Until that chapter, the Marauders live in a kind of golden haze, half prank, half legend. Then the charm of nostalgia collapses. James is a bully, Sirius is cruel, Lupin is complicit, and Lily walks away in disgust. Not Dumbledore, who had gently guided Harry's image of his father, could protect that story any longer. The reader is forced to reevaluate every easy loyalty. So is Harry. So is the audience. The graveyard in Little Hangleton is a different kind of break, almost a genre shift. One chapter earlier, we are still in a sports narrative, bound by the rules of a tournament. Then, a portkey, a cold mist, a grave with Harry's name on it, and Cedric's body hitting the grass with no warning, no heroism, no last words. The magic here is ritualistic and cruel. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. The resurrected Voldemort steps out of the cauldron, and the series steps fully into horror. At the Ministry, the veil ends the last illusion of safety. The battle feels chaotic but survivable until a jet of light, a fall, and Sirius disappearing through a curtain that offers no body, no grave, no closure. The grave was empty. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry out of Godric's Hollow, could make this loss make sense. It is the first senseless death Harry watches and understands. By Deathly Hallows, even the series' own patterns are ready to be broken. King's Cross is an impossible pause, white light, bloodless pain, a conversation with Dumbledore that turns into philosophy and confession. Then the Battle of Hogwarts answers thought with fire, pausing only for Snape's memories before plunging back into war. HBO must resist the urge to smooth these jolts into a consistent mood. Because the next break is not just tonal, it is moral. The next fear is quieter, colder. What if HBO does everything right that can be measured, and still misses everything that actually matters? Imagine it. The castle is perfect, the corridors aged and echoing, the great hall lit like a cathedral of magic. The casting is uncanny, as if the actors had stepped out of the illustrations. The spells blaze with weight and colour, every charm a small miracle of visual craft. Dialogue is lifted almost word for word from the page. This is important. And yet, the Mirror of Erised is treated as a curiosity, a single scene instead of a wound. Harry finds the glass, sees his family, and the camera does not linger. The grave of his childhood is not opened. The boy does not return again and again, does not sit on the cold floor and try to memorize the faces that will not speak. The series moves on, efficient and beautiful, never quite admitting that this was his first real encounter with the parents he never knew. The grave was empty, but the mirror made replicas, and the adaptation refuses to dwell on the temptation to live there. In another episode, the graveyard in Little Hangleton is rendered with exquisite horror, marble angels, wet earth, green fire, a resurrection ritual, framed with precision. But the scene is rushed. The pauses between each ingredient of Voldemort's return tightened until the ceremony feels like a montage. Priori incantatem flickers and ends. The wands sing for a moment, then fall silent before the meaning has time to sink in. The story has reached the plot point. It has not yet reached the soul. Viewers will praise it. How could they not? The surface is flawless. Not Dumbledore, who had always warned that words and names are magic, will be there to say what is missing. Not Hagrid, who had carried a crying baby from a ruined house, will step in to ask why the crying feels softer now. Not Sirius, who had lived 12 years with nothing but memory, will be allowed to object when memory is treated as a passing image instead of a life sentence. Instead, there will be a faint unease, a sense that the Ministry battle is explained too neatly, that the veil is annotated instead of feared, that Snape's worst memory arrives and is gone before the humiliation can settle in the viewer's bones. They will feel a hollowness they cannot name. The truth will be simple. Stories are not defined by how they look, but by where they slow down, where they dare to linger, and what they refuse to explain away. These 7 scenes are the places where the books stop breathing and simply ache. Where the narrative stands over a grave or a mirror or a falling body and refuses to move. If HBO glides past them, it will have adapted the events and abandoned the essence. It will have kept the plot alive while letting the meaning die. So the question becomes unavoidable. Would they rather give us a slightly imperfect surface with a perfect core, or the reverse? And which one do you think they will choose when they stand before the mirror, the graveyard, and the veil? HBO will not be walking into an untouched grave. The films have already traced these 7 scenes in light and shadow, sometimes with reverence, sometimes with a haste that felt almost like fear. The new series inherits both their strengths and their evasions. Consider the mirror. In the first film, the glass is cold and beautiful and almost perfectly faithful in its immediate image, a boy, a family, hands reaching for what is not there. But the story in the book is not a single night's haunting. It is repetition. It is return. It is the slow, secret formation of an addiction to a dream in which his parents are alive and the world is kind. This is important. The adaptation compressed that into a brief temptation, stripping away the sense that Harry might choose illusion over life if left alone long enough. The graveyard in the 4th film is the opposite problem, expansive spectacle, narrowed meaning. The statue, the cauldron, the hiss of Voldemort's rebirth are striking, yet the ritual itself is rushed, its blood magic almost incidental. The wand lore that coils through that chapter in the book, the strange, terrible intimacy of priori incantatem, becomes something like a visual anomaly rather than a theological event in a world where wands are extensions of the soul. The grave was empty of consequence. The audience saw light meeting light, but not the deeper truth that this jewel is the hinge on which the Elder Wand and Death's allegiance will later turn. In the Ministry, the films approach the veil as if it were a piece of scenery instead of a question about what lies beyond the border of magic. Sirius's death is staged as a single stumble and a fall, with almost no prior dread of that archway and almost no aftermath beyond a shouted name. Not Dumbledore, who had spent a lifetime studying the limits of life and death, is allowed to stand in that room and make us feel the weight of what has been lost. The scene ends, and the world moves on too quickly, as if grief were a corridor rather than a chamber. And yet, the films were not faithless. They gave us a Snape whose casting carried the exact grave, exhausted intelligence the role required, so that when the memories finally came, the audience already knew he had been walking through a private winter for years. They gave us King's Cross in Deathly Hallows Part 2, white and hushed and almost holy, a visual that understood Harry's liminal state even when the dialogue simplified Dumbledore's history. They gave us a Battle of Hogwarts soaked in fire and ash, a mood of ending that felt true even when the choreography of certain duels, certain deaths, strayed from the page. Here is the pattern Interrupt HBO must accept. It does not need to choose between fidelity and invention. It has something the films never had: time, episodic structure. The room to let Harry visit the mirror again and again, to linger on the graveyard's ritual, to walk the Ministry's corridors before the veil claims its price. If the series is willing to spend its minutes on meaning instead of merely on motion, it can correct these missteps. If not, the replicas will be gorgeous and hollow. The next question, then, is brutal in its simplicity. When the page and the screen disagree about what is important, whose truth will HBO serve? HBO's only hope is to build the entire architecture of the series around those 7 scenes, to let them become the pillars that hold the story's weight. This is important, because if the structure is wrong, no amount of beautiful magic will save it. Season 1 should not race toward a 3-headed dog and a flaming chessboard. It should narrow, slowly, inexorably, toward a boy in front of a cold mirror, staring at a family that is both alive and dead. The Mirror of Erised must be the emotional climax, not a midterm diversion. An ideal season would spend episodes letting Harry feel the ache of the empty grave in Godric's Hollow, the hollow spaces at Christmas, so that when he finds the mirror, the temptation to vanish into that replica of a life hits with devastating force. Dumbledore's warning about dreams and living must be the final note, the first great lesson about the danger of false comfort. By Season 4, the design must grow harsher. The third task and the graveyard cannot be a hurried montage between school gossip and a Quidditch World Cup epilogue. They deserve an entire episode carved out like a ritual circle. The maze should feel like a slow descent, each hedge a narrowing of Harry's world, until the portkey drops him into the graveyard and the story changes forever. The resurrection, the bone and blood and wand law, priori incantatum rising like ghosts from the grave, should close the season on an image of wands locked and dead voices speaking. The grave was empty, but the past was not. Order of the Phoenix demands an even darker heart. The Ministry and the Veil should not be a single frantic excursion. They should be the culmination of several episodes steeped in prophecy, bureaucracy, and creeping dread. Multiple hours to walk the Department of Mysteries, to let each chamber feel like a question about fate and memory before the archway claims its price. Not Dumbledore, who had always seemed untouchable. Not Hagrid, who had always seemed unbreakable. Not Sirius, who had survived Azkaban only to be taken by a whisper of fabric and falling light. The aftermath must linger into the next season. Grief not as a plot point, but as a permanent scar. And when the Deathly Hallows era arrives, the structure must bow to 3 peaks: Snape's memories, King's Cross, and the Battle of Hogwarts. Each should own an episode. Unhurried, the pensive revelations must unfold like a final, terrible confession. King's Cross must feel like the quiet center of the war. The battle must finally let the castle fight back in full. Thinking in anchor scenes is not a limitation. It is a safeguard against filler that still honors the book's contemplative pacing. The question is whether HBO will accept that discipline or reach for spectacle instead. Because there is one more structural choice that could redeem everything or ruin it utterly. Because there is one more structural choice that could redeem everything or ruin it utterly. It has nothing to do with dragons or duels. It has to do with silence. The books are threaded with dark, quiet moments that sit like unmarked graves in the middle of the story. Harry returning to the Mirror of Erised night after night. The breathless, echoing stillness in the death chamber after Sirius falls through the veil. The suspended white hush before Dumbledore finally answers Harry at King's Cross. These are not pauses between scenes. They are the scenes. Take the mirror. A boy who has never seen his parents stands before a piece of glass that lies to him with perfect tenderness. He comes back again and again, not for spectacle, but for absence, for everything his life is not. The camera must dare to linger on his face as he realizes that this replica of a family is all he will ever have there. No music swelling to rescue him. Just the slow, terrible recognition that the grave was empty long before he ever visited Godric's Hollow. This is important. In the Ministry, when Sirius disappears, the temptation will be to rush. Cut to screams, to spells, to chaos. But the wound of that moment is the silence after the archway swallows him, when Harry waits for Sirius to step back through, and he does not. Not Dumbledore, who had mastered more magic than any living wizard, can fill that space for him. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from one ruin to another, can make that room feel less vast. The audience needs those seconds of staring at stone and curtain and nothing at all, because that is when the truth finally lands. Some doors do not reopen. At King's Cross, the entire moral architecture of the story hangs on a conversation in the white light between a boy and a flawed old man. The pause before Dumbledore speaks, when Harry asks if this is real or only in his head, is not dead air. It is judgment delayed. It is the weight of every hidden plan, every half-truth, every child sent to the slaughter. When Dumbledore finally answers, the line only works if the silence before it has been allowed to breathe. Executives fear silence. They fear that in 10 seconds of wordless grief, the audience will reach for another story. But prestige television lives or dies on whether it believes that viewers will stay with a boy staring at a mirror, or at a veil, or at a spectral version of his own nearly dead body if they understand what is at stake. So something must be cut. Let it be a Quidditch match. Let it be a minor corridor intrigue, a redundant classroom scene, a clever bit of magic that delights but does not deepen. Better to lose a subplot than to steal 10 seconds from a major death. Better to trim a battle than to hurry a goodbye. Because if HBO keeps the courage to hold these quiet centers, then every spell, every graveyard, every charge across the castle stones will feel earned. If it does not, the series may be technically alive, but something essential will be missing. And there is one more cost they must be willing to pay. One more sacrifice of comfort and certainty, if they want this adaptation to tell the truth. The sacrifice of comfort and certainty begins here, with a woman the films kept half in shadow. Lily Evans Potter is not a tragic backdrop. She is the quiet engine of the entire story, and these 7 scenes are the only places the camera can prove it. In the Mirror of Erised, Harry thinks he has found his parents. He has not. He has found their absence, given shape by a glass that feeds on longing. Yet even there, Lily is the axis. Her hand on his shoulder, her eyes meeting his, the way he keeps coming back until Dumbledore warns him that living in dreams means forgetting to live. This is important. If HBO reduces that mirror to a sentimental reunion, they erase the first lesson Lily leaves her son, that love is real, but illusions of the dead can devour the living. Years later, in Snape's worst memory, the grave of that illusion is dug deeper. The grave was empty of simple heroes and simple villains. Not Dumbledore, who had built his war on gifted children. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from the ruins but never saw the corridors where James hunted his classmate for sport. Not Sirius, who had laughed as Snape dangled upside down. Only Lily stands in that courtyard as a moral force, refusing James's arrogance and Snape's slur with the same cold clarity. When her later memories unfold in the pensieve, HBO must let us feel that consistency, Lily choosing values over romance, over history, over the boy who loved her and the boy who would die for her. In the graveyard of Little Hangleton, Priori Incantatem makes that choice visible. The smoky replica of Lily that spills from Voldemort's wand is not a ghost, not a hallucination, but the echo of a woman whose refusal to move aside rewrote wand lore itself. She guides Harry, buys him seconds, turns a duel into an escape. Lily was a charms prodigy, and the magic that answers him there is the long tale of a protection she forged with her own death. Her absence is just as loud. At the Vale, when Sirius falls, Lily does not appear. The silence is deliberate. Harry reaches for a mother he has never known and finds only a rippling curtain and the echo of his own voice. In King's Cross, Dumbledore speaks of love and sacrifice, but the pattern is hers. Harry walks back into the forest as she once walked into the nursery, accepting death so that a child might live. His feet follow her invisible footprints. HBO cannot treat this woman as a face in a photograph while writing Dumbledore and Snape as operatic leads. She is the unseen architect of the story's moral universe. Minimize her in these scenes, and the tale collapses back into a familiar myth of wounded men and the destinies that bind them. Honor her, and the series remembers its own truth. And there is one more shadow they must face, one more buried influence whose mishandling would warp the entire war. That shadow is not a person but a pattern. It is the decision to hide the truth and call it protection. It is the quiet, repeated lie that shapes every grave, every victory, every loss. Dumbledore is its most luminous practitioner. He hides the Mirror of Erised after letting an 11-year-old stand night after night before a replica of the life he will never have, knowing the boy is starving for parents and offering illusion instead of explanation. He withholds the prophecy, slices it into fragments of need-to-know information, then lets its half-truths drive Harry into the Ministry. He delays the full horror of the Horcrux plan until after the graveyard, after Cedric's body, after a child has watched murder performed as ritual. This is important. When Harry finally lies on the King's Cross floor, blood on stone, his last conversation with Dumbledore is not just comfort, it is the bill for every secret coming due. Snape lives inside the same ethic, but curdled. His entire existence is a charm of concealment, double agent, masked Death Eater, trusted professor. His love for Lily is buried so deep it can only surface as bitterness toward the boy who carries her eyes. Not Dumbledore, who had asked for his loyalty. Not Sirius, who had mocked him by the lake. Not Hagrid, who had always believed in second chances. none of them see the full story until his memories pour into the pensieve, a posthumous confession instead of a living conversation. HBO cannot rush that transfer. The images must linger. The worst memory, the Patronus in the forest, the moment he begs Dumbledore to keep the boy ignorant because he cannot bear the resemblance to the woman he failed. Around them, institutions practice the same quiet violence. The ministry hides the veil, hides the unspeakables, hides the very language of what is being studied in the Department of Mysteries. The grave was empty of explanations. No one tells Harry what that archway is, what it does, why voices whisper beyond its curtain. Their opacity is not neutral, it bends the battle. Sirius dies because a godfather and a godson are fighting in a room whose dangers have been deliberately unnamed. Only in the Battle of Hogwarts does the story finally turn on open declaration. Secrets are spoken in the Great Hall, allegiances declared, the truth of Snape, of Dumbledore's wand, of Harry's own status as a Horcrux laid bare. Truth itself becomes a weapon. Voldemort's borrowed power unravels the moment everyone in that hall knows exactly how fragile he is. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even her protection cannot function until Harry chooses to walk into the forest with his eyes open, not closed. HBO must not soften these choices into simple wisdom. The audience should leave asking, with genuine unease, whether they too would have lied to keep Harry alive, whether they would have stepped through the veil of certainty or stayed in the safety of not knowing. Because one last secret still waits, and its revelation will demand an answer. So now the question turns, quietly but inexorably, toward the person watching. Toward you. If everything else had to be surrendered to compromise and budget and a director's interpretation, if you could wrap protective magic around only one of these 7 moments, which scene would you guard with your life, and why? This is important, because that choice is not just about adaptation, it is about the private contract you have already made with this story. For some, it will always be the Mirror of Erised, Harry, thin and small and shaking, reaching out to touch a replica of a family that was never truly there. Perhaps the line that undid you was Dumbledore's quiet warning that men have wasted away before that glass, entranced by what they see. Not Dumbledore, who had every reason to lose himself in his own reflected regrets, but Harry, who steps back. For others, the sacred line lives in the graveyard. Not the spectacle of Voldemort's return, but the soft, stunned horror when Harry understands that the cup was a portkey, that every step of the plan had led him to this grave, that his blood is being taken not as accident, but as design. Maybe it is the whispered "Hold on, Harry," when the shades emerge in priori incantatem, the dead forming a fragile ring around the living. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but here, surrounded by stones and names and dates, death finally feels present. Or perhaps your line waits behind the veil in the ministry, in the half-heard whispers that only Harry seems to catch. A turn of Sirius's head, a flash of laughter, then absence. No speech, no last declaration. Just the unbearable simplicity of falling through. Which exact gesture there must remain untouched for you to believe this new version has told the truth. Some will choose King's Cross, white and endless, with Harry and Dumbledore walking among the echoes of every choice they have made. A single word about pity or power or the Hallows might be the one that taught you what courage meant. Others will point to Snape's memories, to the way Lily's name leaves his mouth as both prayer and confession. Lily was a charms prodigy, but in that basin of remembered light, it is not her magic that matters most. It is his. When you name your one inviolable moment, you are also naming what Harry Potter means to you. Is it comfort, the mirror that shows you the family you lost? Is it justice, the graveyard where evil finally steps into the light? Is it sacrifice, the forest walk, the veil, the boy who goes to die and discovers he is still alive? HBO's success will not be measured in streaming numbers alone. It will be measured in how many of you can look at your chosen scene and say, "It survived." The line is still there, the look is still there, the truth is still there, so write it. In the comments, name the scene, the line, the gesture you cannot bear to lose, and read what others have claimed as theirs. This is the beginning of a negotiation, not a verdict. Because the next question is not just what they must preserve, but what, if anything, they are allowed to change. So now, walk the other path. If this is a negotiation, we must first name the nightmare they are not allowed to choose. Begin with the mirror. Imagine it reduced to a single tasteful montage, soft golden light, swelling strings, Harry's breath catching once, maybe twice, as translucent parents appear behind him like a sentimental advertisement for grief. Dumbledore arrives almost at once. A gentle speech about moving on. Cut to black. No nights of obsession, no return visits, no slow, corrosive temptation to live inside a lie. The grave was empty, but the illusion is treated as harmless, a pretty charm instead of a dangerous hunger. Then, Snape's worst memory, stripped of its teeth. The camera lingers on James's grin, not on Snape's terror. The scene is staged like a mischievous school prank, all quick cuts and jaunty music, the crowd of students laughing as if this humiliation was simply part of growing up. Lily's outrage is softened into mild disapproval. James is framed as roguish and charming. Snape is framed as overreacting. The horror of being pinned, exposed. Helpless in front of everyone you know is blurred into a boy who cannot take a joke. This is important. Because if that memory is not allowed to be a wound, his entire story collapses. In the graveyard, the disaster is quieter but worse. 30 seconds, maybe less. A hooded figure. A flash of green that happens off-screen. Cedric falls, barely in frame, a narrative inconvenience. The ritual is a quick incantation over a cauldron that might as well be set dressing. No bone of the father, no flesh of the servant, no blood of the enemy. Priori incantatem is reduced to a colourful explosion. A clash of beams that means nothing, teaches nothing, leaves no echo of the dead. Not Dumbledore, who had traced the logic of wand law through that moment, could recognize this as the turning point it was meant to be. At the Ministry, the veil glows like a friendly portal. Souls drift visibly beyond it, luminous and articulate, explaining in careful detail what it means to cross over. There is no terrible uncertainty, no sense that the stone arch is a boundary you cannot think your way around. In the next hour, Snape's memories become a romantic music video. Soft focus, lingering hands. Lily's hair catching the light as a score tells you exactly when to feel. Lily was a charms prodigy, but here her complexity is flattened into a single, tragic love interest. King's Cross follows as a siggy bright heaven with clear rules, labelled platforms, glowing diagrams of hallows and horcruxes. No ambiguity, no space where Harry must decide what to believe, just exposition. And at last, the Battle of Hogwarts is compressed into one frantic episode. Deaths happen in the background, glimpsed and gone. Fred, Remus, Tonks fallen at the edge of the frame while the story hurries past. The final duel is a silent, wordless beam struggle in an empty courtyard. No words, no choices, no revelation of how Voldemort truly dies. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry's body. Not Sirius, who had fallen through the veil. No one is given the weight of an ending. If this is the nightmare, what does the opposite look like? In detail, frame by frame? The opposite is not brighter colors and smoother duels. It is time. It is weight. It is the grave refusing to be skipped. The Mirror of Erised is not a single scene, but an infection that spreads across episodes. Harry finds it once, trembling, and the shot lingers on his reflection with James's hand almost touching his shoulder. The second visit is longer. The third is longer still, his eyes hollowed by sleeplessness, the music thinning to a single aching note as he chooses the replica over the world that is actually alive. This is important. Dumbledore's warning does not arrive as a quirky aside in a corridor, it arrives in the stillness of a midnight classroom. The camera closes on his face as he says that it does not do to dwell on dreams, and the words land like a quiet thunderclap because we have watched Harry already begin to drown. In this version, the pensieve is not a plot device, it is an autopsy. Snape's worst memory is filmed with documentary intimacy, the lens refusing to look away as James hangs him upside down, as Sirius laughs, as Lily intervenes and then turns away in disgust. Not Dumbledore, who had spoken of James as if the past were tidy, not Sirius, who had edited his own cruelty into mischief. The story allows no one to be only victim or only hero. Years later, when Harry dives into the final cascade of memories, the camera returns to that same angle, that same light. But the man on the ground is older, broken, still choosing to protect the child of his tormentor. The truth is not softened, it is shown. The graveyard ritual in Goblet of Fire unfolds as a full-length liturgy of horror. The cauldron, the bone, the flesh, the blood, each ingredient named, each charm spoken with ritual precision, the air itself seeming to recoil as Voldemort rises. The priori incantatem is not a beam struggle, but a slow, impossible tether, the dead emerging in order, each echo a reminder that the grave was empty for too many families long before Harry's. From there, the Ministry battle is a labyrinth of dread, corridors looping, rooms shifting, the veil always somewhere just out of frame until it is not. When Sirius falls, the doorway is not dramatic fire, it is an unlit absence that haunts every subsequent shot of that chamber. By the end, the series understands that stillness can be more terrifying than spectacle. King's Cross is nearly bare, white light, a bench, Harry and Dumbledore in a conversation that lasts an entire act. No rushing, no cutting away, only the slow excavation of guilt, hallows, and the plan that asked a boy to walk into death. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even her protection could not spare him this knowledge. Then the Battle of Hogwarts is allowed to be what it always was, a war, multi-episode, attritional, every corridor contested, every death seen and felt. Fred does not die offhandedly, the camera stays. Remus and Tonks lie in the foreground, not the background. The defenders are tired, dirty, terrified, and still standing. Such an adaptation would not merely retell Harry Potter, it would reconsecrate it, treating each of these 7 moments as sacred text rather than nostalgic reference. It would ask, again and without mercy, what it costs to love in a world like this. And if HBO chose this path, if they dared to carry that weight, then one final question would remain. Hanging over every frame like a spell not yet cast, what exactly would they have to sacrifice to get there? So we walk back through the rooms, one by one. Slowly, like returning to a battlefield after the smoke has cleared, naming what must remain standing if anything else is allowed to fall. The first room is the Mirror of Erised, cold and moonlit, where a small boy meets his parents in glass before he ever meets them in memory. Its function is temptation, the seduction of illusion, of a life where the dead are still alive if you only stare hard enough. This is important. If HBO softens that ache, if it becomes a charming Easter egg instead of a grave made of light, the story forgets that Harry's first real enemy is the fantasy of what he cannot have. The second room is the one no adult wanted Harry to see, Snape's worst memory. Here, hero worship shatters. James is not a flawless martyr, but a cruel, laughing teenager. Lily's moral spine is visible. The Marauders fracture in real time. The function is to destroy the simple tale and replace it with a harder truth. Not Dumbledore, who had curated a legend around James, would have chosen to show it this way. HBO must. The third room is a graveyard, where the grave was empty of comfort and full of ritual. Voldemort rises through bone, flesh, and stolen blood, a liturgy of evil that makes magic feel like something that can desecrate as easily as it can protect. Its function is embodiment, the horror of deliberate, structured cruelty. If the ritual becomes spectacle instead of sacrament, the cost of opposing him is diminished. The fourth room is the ministry, shattered glass and spinning prophecies ending at the veil. Here the function is confrontation with unexplained death. Sirius passes through nothingness and does not return. Not Hagrid, who had once carried Harry from another ruin, can lift him back. Children learn that some doors stay closed, that magic will not always offer an answer. The fifth room is another pensieve, but now it holds Snape's life. Lily was a charms prodigy, and his love for her is the hidden current beneath every cruel choice and every act of impossible courage. This room's function is revelation of hidden love and crushing guilt, the knowledge that a man can be both abuser and guardian and never stop paying. The sixth room is King's Cross, white and still, where Harry speaks with the architect of so many half-truths. Its function is philosophical reckoning, with Hallows, with Horcruxes, with whether his walk into the forest was suicide or a different kind of magic. Here, death is a conversation, and the ethics of what adults choose to tell children are laid bare. The seventh room is Hogwarts itself under siege, stone and flame, and a crowd choosing to stand together. Its function is communal victory, not a lone boy defeating a monster, but a castle full of people insisting that love and loyalty are a stronger plan than fear. Across all seven, the threads are the same: death, love, truth, and the terrible question of what to reveal to the young about the dangers waiting for them. HBO's adaptation will not be judged on how many replicas of book lines it hides in the corners, but on whether these structural and emotional pillars are left intact. In that sense, the audience becomes something more than spectators. You become guardians of these rooms, keepers of the original spell. And as we turn to the final question of what you can do, the real challenge is simple. Will you let them forget, Or will you hold this adaptation to the standard these scenes demand? Your watch begins the moment the first casting announcement appears, long before a single frame of magic is rendered. This is important, because by then the plan for these 7 scenes will already be in motion, either safeguarded with reverence or quietly compromised in a boardroom no one will ever see. So the first task is simple in description and difficult in practice. Pay attention. Not to every rumor, but to the patterns in what is said. When the actor playing Snape speaks about his arc, does he mention humiliation, the grave weight of regret, the pensive memories that strip him bare, or only the cool of a double agent? When the showrunner is asked about Goblet of Fire, does the answer linger on dragons and spectacle, or on the graveyard, blood, and the old wand law of priori incantatum? The words they choose now are replicas of the scenes they intend to build. Not Dumbledore, who had once insisted that words are our most inexhaustible source of magic, would miss the significance of that. Neither should the audience. Early trailers, casting notes, interviews about tone and focus, each is a small charm, a revealing fragment of the larger story they believe they are telling. If the Mirror of Erised is shown only as a glittering object and not as a room of unbearable silence where a child almost chooses illusion over life, that is a warning. From there, the conversation must deepen. Fandom spaces will talk regardless. The question is what they talk about. Will the discourse circle endlessly around hair color and wand designs, or will it return again and again to whether Snape's worst memory is allowed to be truly ugly? Whether the ministry battle feels like a descent into a bureaucratic underworld rather than a hallway skirmish? Whether the veil is treated as more than a prop? This is important. Shift the center of gravity from surface to structure, from trivia to truth. When the series finally arrives, watch with a checklist that is not a tally of nitpicks, but a ledger of gravity. Does the graveyard resurrection breathe, with time for the ritual, the bone, the blood, the terror of Voldemort becoming fully alive again? Does King's Cross feel like a liminal cathedral where Dumbledore's shame over Ariana and the Deathly Hallows is laid bare, or just an exposition platform? Does the Battle of Hogwarts remember its dead, or hurry past the bodies? Support the voices that ask those questions clearly. Amplify criticism and praise that speaks about silence, pacing, moral complexity. The way the camera lingers on Harry at his parents' grave or flinches away. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins, not Sirius, who had offered escape, could protect the story now. That guardianship falls to those who knew what these scenes meant before any adaptation existed. In the end, this is not an act of hostility, but of love. Lily was a charms prodigy, and she understood that the strongest protections are woven from intention as much as technique. To insist that the mirror, the graveyard, the pensive, the battle, the veil and King's Cross remain recognizable is to stand watch over the rooms that shaped you. The grave was empty once, the replicas fooled almost everyone. Do not let that happen to the heart of this story. Because if you hold the line here, you do more than judge an adaptation. You help decide what Harry Potter will mean for the next generation, and whether the next child who finds these scenes encounters them in their full unsettling power or only in the softened echo of what they once were. So, stay in the fight. Do not let the grave of this story be left unattended, its most dangerous scenes eroded by silence and time. The studio has its plan. You need one too. Begin with the simplest piece of magic you still control. Say the names of the moments that must not be touched. In the comments, lay down your own non-negotiable scenes and lines like wards around a battlefield. Is it Harry standing before the Mirror of Erised, aching to live inside a reflection with parents who are not truly there? Is it the Ministry battle and the Veil, where the world first felt that death in this universe was not theatrical, but absolute? This is important. Treat that thread as a collective spell of protection. Each memory, each quoted line, each quiet insistence that Snape's worst memory must remain humiliating and ugly, that the graveyard resurrection must keep every drop of blood magic and one-bound truth becomes another layer of defense. Not Dumbledore, who had once tried to orchestrate the entire war from a single office, not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from the ruins, can do this work now. Only the ones still alive, with these pages in their hands. If you want to keep watch over what comes next, you will need to return here. Subscribe, not as a hollow ritual, but as a decision to walk back into this conversation each time HBO unveils another piece of its design. There will be deep dives into the Mirror, into the King's Cross limbo, where Dumbledore finally confesses what he knew and when, into the Battle of Hogwarts, where every death must still feel like a body falling, not a visual effect. Share this with the friends who grew up beside you in these books and never quite found the language for why the thought of a softened adaptation makes them uneasy. Let this video be the articulation of that unease, the naming of stakes they have felt but never spoken. That if the pensive memories are trimmed, if the veil is made gentle, if the replicas of these scenes replace their real brutal selves, something essential will be gone. The grave was empty once, the replica fooled a world. It cannot happen again. There will be a reckoning. When the series finally reaches these 7 scenes, this channel will return to them with the same ruthless honesty, laying book beside frame, line beside line, hope beside outcome. Lily was a charms prodigy, and even she could not foresee every consequence of her protection. The showrunners will miss things. The question is, which things? Remember, in the end, stories do not endure because corporations guard them. They endure because readers and watchers remember what they were meant to be, and refuse to accept anything less than the truth they first encountered in the dark, with the book open and the world very quiet. So we end where we began, with a boy in front of a piece of glass that is not really glass, in a room that is not really empty, staring at a family that is not really alive. The Mirror of Erised is the first grave Harry ever visits. The grave was empty. This is important. There are no bones, no soil, no names carved in stone, only a reflection that behaves as if the dead had simply stepped sideways into light. In that cold classroom, with the castle breathing slowly around him, he meets his parents in the only way magic can truly resurrect the lost, as a question he cannot stop asking. Every reader has stood in that room, not Dumbledore, who had watched entire generations pass through Hogwarts without ever seeing their private mirrors. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins without knowing what picture would one day undo him. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of godfatherly afternoons and never seen the boy kneel before his own absence. Only you knew the exact place in the books where the world went silent, and something in you stepped forward to look. For some, it was that first night with the mirror. For others, it was Snape's worst memory, when the golden story of the Marauders cracked and you saw the cruelty beneath the laughter. For others still, it was the graveyard in Little Hangleton, when Voldemort rose from the cauldron and the charm between twin wands forced ghosts from green light instead of from the ground. Wherever it was, the effect was the same. A private haunting, a room that belonged only to you and the page. Adaptations are mirrors too. They can show you what you most want to see, every spell rendered in flawless light, every corridor of Hogwarts polished, every duel in the Battle of Hogwarts choreographed like sacred dance. Or they can turn slightly and show you something truer and harder. The silence in King's Cross when Harry asks if it is all in his head. The way Snape's memories move like a wound through the pensieve. The weight of a name on a grave that the camera does not rush past. No series can recreate the first time you read the words, "Lily was a charms prodigy," or the way your chest tightened when Harry knelt before his parents' stone in Godric's Hollow. That was your mirror. That was your room. But the HBO adaptation can choose to honor the same silences, the same wounds, the same deliberate spaces where the story refuses to explain itself and simply lets you stand there and feel. When their version ends and the last credits fade, what will you see when you walk back through these 7 rooms? Will it feel as if you have visited your old ghosts and found them still speaking, or as if someone has built a bright, expensive theme park on their graves and called it truth? The plan from here is simple, and it is yours. Keep watching, but keep reading. Guard the rooms that made this more than a story about magic. Remember the quiet boy in front of the mirror, the reflection that waited for him in the dark, and ask yourself, as the new series begins to cast its own reflection, whose desire is this, really? And what will it cost if you dare to look away?